Chapter 2086. 300 years wasn't a long time, but it wasn't short either. The invasion of the star abyss had caused some impact on the 1 starry sky. Cultivators' cultivation and breakthroughs had become more difficult than before. Even the number of spirit jades had decreased compared to 300 years ago. Another impact was the birth of a large number of insect paths. The number of insect paths in the starry sky today was several times more than 300 years ago, and this number was still increasing. It seemed that the invasion of the star abyss had caused the entire starry sky to be scarred. The originally stable space had become easily broken. This was the root cause of the birth of insect paths. There was one advantage to having more insect paths, and that was that it had become more convenient for cultivators to travel between places. The nearest frontline battlefield was several galaxies away. With the help of the star map given by Leopard 5, Lu Yi and Jiu Yan found a nearby insect path and used it to cross a long distance. A few days later, a huge floating fortress appeared in their field of vision. Looking at it from afar, Lu Yi was shocked. The refining skills of this starry sky were indeed much better than the one he came from. Such a huge fortress was simply a super battleship. It wasn't easy to refine it. According to the mark on the star map, this Thunder Battle Fortress was one of the strongholds of the frontline battlefield. There were hundreds of such strongholds scattered in the starry sky, surrounding the entire battlefield in a circular shape. The scale of the battlefield was also different from what Lu Yi had imagined. The frontline battlefield here was a vast star field that covered several galaxies. Some information from Leopard 5 made Lu Yi realize that if the insect path of the star abyss had not been contained in the initial stage, it would have brought a lot of trouble to the starry sky. It was because of this that he felt very fortunate. After the insect path of the star abyss was opened, it seemed to have alarmed the Constellation Palace. This supreme treasure suddenly exerted its power to seal it, which prevented the subsequent trouble. Otherwise, the starry sky would have been in chaos. As time passed, this chaos would have continued to spread until it was uncontrollable. The arrival of the two had obviously attracted the attention of the Thunder Battle Fortress. After all, they were two immortal state experts with unfamiliar auras. Jiu Yan, in particular, had almost reached the peak of the immortal state. At such a sensitive time, the Thunder Battle Fort would not ignore the appearance of any immortal state warriors. Due to that, before the two of them could even reach the Thunderbolt War Fortress, a warship had already arrived. Formidable auras emerged from the warship to lock down on the two of them from afar. Those auras did not belong to cultivators. Rather, they were the many offensive magic arrays and magic treasures on the warship. Should the two of them make any reckless moves, they would be met with a storm of attacks. There was also a figure standing on the deck of the warship, looking over warily. Lu Yi and Jiu Yan stepped forward fearlessly and stood a dozen li away from the battleship. They could clearly feel that the immortal state expert opposite them was scrutinizing them. She wore a beautiful human-shaped armor and looked like a woman. The armor was only as tall as two people. She held a round ball in her hand and waved it at Lu Yi and Jiu Yan from afar. Then she lowered her head to investigate. When Lu Yi saw this, he immediately recalled Leopard 5's previous instructions and understood that this immortal state expert was investigating his and Jiu Yan's origins at this moment. Occasionally, some strange guests from the star abyss would sneak into the starry skies and cause trouble everywhere. Therefore, all the powerhouses in this starry skies of single essence had been uniformly registered. This way, even if they didn't know each other, they could still find out each other's origins through some means. That round ball should be this type of tool. However, Lu Yi and Jiu Yan were new here. How could they have any records? The other party naturally could not find anything. However, under her perception, whether it was Lu Yi or Jiu Yan, she did not sense any star abyss aura, which made her puzzled. Star abyss outsiders were actually very easy to distinguish. Star abyss aura could not be concealed at all, especially in front of immortal state experts. Puzzled, she asked in a delicate voice, "Where are the two of you from?" According to the predetermined speech, Lu Yi stepped forward and cupped his hands from afar. "We are secluded cultivators. We have not come out of seclusion for hundreds of years. We suddenly heard the bad news of the starry sky and came to serve. Secluded cultivators." The woman was stunned. In the first 100 years of Star Abyss's invasion, there were indeed some secluded cultivators who were forced to come out, and all of them had extraordinary strength. However, it had been 300 years. So how could there still be secluded cultivators who did not care about worldly affairs? After thinking for a moment, she beckoned, "Come over here and talk." Lu Yi nodded and stepped forward with Jiyan. Soon they arrived at the warship. The woman did not take off her armor, and many of the auras on the warship were still firmly locked onto Lu Yi and Jiyan. Obviously, she did not believe Lu Ye's words. This was a matter of course. Even if she did not sense Star Abyss's aura from Lu Yi and Jiyan, it did not mean that these two strange immortals who had suddenly appeared were not a problem. "Where were you two secluded cultivators before?" she asked. Lu Yi casually mentioned the name of a galaxy. It was the interior of a nameless, desolate star. "We had not left for hundreds of years. It was only a few days ago that we sensed some abnormalities and came out to investigate. Who knew that the starry sky would encounter a calamity?" Inside the armor, the woman frowned slightly. She had no way to investigate what Lu Yi had said. After thinking for a while, she said, "Forget it. Follow me into the fortress." If these two people were really suspicious, they would definitely be exposed after entering the Thunder Battle Fortress. Even if they were really Star Abyss's outsiders, they would not be able to make any waves in the Thunder Battle Fortress. In the past, there had been Star Abyss's outsiders who had tried to sneak in, but no matter how strong or weak they were, they all ended up in a miserable state. The warship quickly returned to the Thunder Battle Fortress and landed on a square. Lu Yi looked around and found that there were not many cultivators in the Thunder Battle Fortress. A few cultivators did not seem to be very strong. He could not help but feel strange. The woman in the armor called out, "Follow me. I will take you." Before she finished speaking, she paused and listened attentively as if she had received some instructions. Then she said, "The fortress lord wants to see you two. Follow me." She was slightly stunned. Logically speaking, she had to bring Lu Yi and Jiu Yen to a special place to thoroughly verify that the two of them were not guests from Star Abyss. If there were no problems, then she would register the two of them. However, she did not expect that the fortress lord would directly send her a message, since it was the fortress lord's order. She had to carry it out unconditionally. After half an hour, the three of them came to a small courtyard. There were artificial mountains and flowing water in the courtyard. The environment was beautiful. There was also a pond. Beside the pond, there was a meatball sitting cross-legged. The woman came to the meatball and cupped her fists. "Fortress Lord, I have brought them here." The fortress Lord nodded slightly. "You can go now." "Yes," the woman in the armor responded. She could not help but take a look at Lu Yi and Jiyan before she left. Reclusive cultivator Lu Yi and senior sister Jiyan greet the fortress lord. Lu Yi went forward and bowed. He could not help but wonder what kind of cultivation technique the fortress lord was cultivating. How could he be so fat? This was a veritable meatball. His round head was on top of his body, and his neck could not be seen at all. The fortress lord was fishing, but no fish took the bait. He turned to look at Lu Yi and Jiyan and stretched out his hand with a smile. "Sit. Don't be so reserved." Lu Yi said seriously, "We dare not be presumptuous in front of the fortress lord." There was no place to sit, so they might as well stand. Moreover, this unbelievably fat fort lord gave him a very unique feeling. He couldn't sense the other party's depth at all. He quietly glanced at Jiu Yen and saw that Jiu Yen was also shaking her head with a solemn expression. This was a powerhouse, and a very, very strong one at that. Otherwise, Juyan would not have shown such an expression. Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat. This fortress lord had probably cast his own Dao foundation. Where are you two from? The fortress lord asked with a smile, seemingly chatting. Lu Yi was about to repeat what he had said before when the fortress lord said, I am asking about the starry sky where you two came from. Lu Yi could not help but blink. Fortress lord, what do you mean? The fortress lord turned his head and looked at Lu Yi and Jian seriously. If I did not see it with my own eyes, I would not believe it. You have no trace of Yunyuan starry sky on you, but you came from another starry sky? How did you come here? Was your starry sky also invaded by Star Abyss? He seemed to have a lot of doubts and could not wait to get answers. However, Lu Ye's heart was filled with shock. He never expected that the other party would see through him and Jian at a glance. How could he tell whether they had any trace of the starry sky on them? Don't be afraid. The fortress lord seemed to see the concerns in his heart and comforted him. If I had any malicious intentions towards you, I would not have let you come here. It's just that this is the first time I have seen a cultivator from another starry sky. So I asked a few more questions. Lu Yi calmed down and asked, How did the fortress lord see through us? Since the other party had already pointed it out, there was no point in continuing to play dumb. Instead, he might even offend the other party, so he might as well admit it. Moreover, he could feel that the fortress lord did not have any malicious intentions towards him and Jian. The fortress lord said, I did not see through you, but someone told me. Someone told him? Who? Since this person was the fortress lord, it meant that he was the strongest person here. If even he could not see through them, who else could see through these secrets? As for who told me, it's not convenient for me to tell you. The fortress lord winked at Lu Yi. His eyes were small to begin with, so he could not see through them. Can you tell me about you now? The fortress lord asked. Lu Yi thought about it for a moment, and it seemed that there was nothing he couldn't say. Moreover, after being exposed, he felt relieved and said, We do come from another first Yuan starry sky. The invasion of our star abyss hasn't officially started yet, but there are some precursors. He immediately told the fortress lord about his previous experiences. The fortress lord listened carefully. After a while, he showed a look of understanding. A ghost palanquin? I have never heard of it. In other words, you came here because of the ghost palanquin? Yes, but after bringing the 10 of us here, the ghost palanquin disappeared without a trace. We don't know how to go back. Chapter 2087. As you said, the traces in your starry sky are indeed the precursor to the invasion of the star abyss. I'm afraid it won't be long before the invasion of the star abyss officially begins. The smile on the fort master's face disappeared. Instead, he revealed a trace of reminiscence. If we can't deal with the star abyss gate in the early stages, the fate of the starry sky will be slowly nibbled away. Star abyss gate. It's that red vortex insect path. According to what you said before, you should have seen it. Lu Yi nodded. The star abyss gate and the star abyss insect path were the same thing. They just had different names. Fort Master, may I ask how to deal with the star abyss gate? Lu Yi quickly asked. The star abyss gate on the Thousand Forms sea had been sealed by the Constellation Hall, but there was more than one star abyss gate. The invasion of the star abyss had already shown signs. In the future, many star abyss gates would appear in the starry sky. If they could find a way, I don't know. The fort master shook his head. Isn't it ridiculous? It's been 300 years, but so far, no one knows how to deal with the star abyss gate. No clue at all? Lu Ye's expression was grim. Someone proposed a conjecture. Since the star abyss gate opened from the opposite side when the star abyss invaded, could it be possible to go to the opposite side and find a way to destroy the star abyss gate? Then someone went there, but there was no news. No one knows whether they're dead or alive. Lu Yi was silent. Those who dared to go to the star abyss from the starry sky were definitely the strongest echelon of cultivators in the single-essence starry sky. Even so, there was no effect. This showed how dangerous the star abyss was. After a moment of silence, the fort master said, "Although I don't know which starry sky you came from, since you can't go back, then stay here. In any case, we have the same enemy." While speaking, he looked at Jiu Yen. "Moreover, this Tao friend should be in the stage of forging his Tao foundation. This place may be an opportunity for you." Jiu Yen had not spoken, and it was Lu Yi who talked to the fort master. At this moment, he finally couldn't help but ask, "May I ask what cultivation level the fort master is now?" "My cultivation—" The fort master scratched his face with his fat hand. "According to the division of the star abyss, I should have entered the Tao realm." "Tao realm," Jiu Yen murmured. The fort master chuckled. "Being entangled with the star abyss for so many years, it's not like we didn't gain anything. Although it's getting harder and harder for the cultivators at the bottom to break through, the cultivators at the top have made quite a bit of progress instead. The so-called Tao realm is the realm after forging the Tao foundation. These are all the information that we've scouted out from the star abyss. It's just that the Tao realm is a general term, and there are even more detailed divisions. You don't have to understand these now." Jiu Yen's face was filled with longing. He had been stuck on the path of cultivation for so many years, and he finally saw the light at this moment. The castle master knew what she was thinking. Before the star abyss invaded, this starry sky cultivator faced the same predicament as your side. After reaching the deity realm, there was no way to advance any further. It was only after the star abyss invaded that this situation changed. At this point, he sneered. Back then, countless cultivators wanted to find a way forward, but they were trapped and couldn't. In the end, they obtained it in this way. How sad and regretful. He waved his hand and said, "You can stay in the castle for now. I'll get someone to send you some things later. What you choose after that is up to you." "Many thanks, castle master." Lu Yi quickly thanked him. A moment later, a tall woman walked in from outside and led Lu Yi and Jiu Yen away. In front of a 3-story building, the woman stopped and said, "This will be your residence. The castle master instructed that if the two of you need anything in the future, you can send a message to me, and I will prepare the appropriate things for the two of you." Hearing her voice, Lu Yi finally reacted. The other party was the cultivator who wore the armor from before. She immediately cupped her fists and said, "Many thanks, fellow Taoist. There's also these." The woman handed over some jade slips. "The castle master asked me to give these to the two of you. The two of you can take a good look at them. They should help the two of you better understand the current situation." Lu Yi thanked her again. The woman left. Lu Yi and Jiu Yen glanced at each other and then walked into the 3-story building. A moment later, on the 3rd floor, the senior sister and junior brother sat across from each other. They each held a jade slip and immersed themselves in it. The jade slip that Lu Yi was looking at gave a detailed introduction of the many big and small events in the starry sky during the 300 years of the Star Abyss's invasion, as well as the many changes in the starry sky. The more she looked at it, the more uncomfortable she felt because many of these records corresponded to the starry sky on the other side of the 10,000 Elephant Sea. After checking one jade slip, she picked up another one. This jade slip recorded the situation of the various front lines, allowing Lu Yi to have a clearer understanding of the situation on the battlefield. While she was reading seriously, Jian suddenly exclaimed, "What's wrong?" Lu Yi quickly looked up at her and saw Jian's excited expression, as if she had seen a treasure. She directly handed the jade slip in her hand to Lu Yi. "Junior brother, take a look at it yourself." Lu Yi picked it up and was shocked. This is a method to establish one's Tao foundation. This jade slip might not have much value in this starry sky because this was already a widely circulated method. As long as one's cultivation reached the peak of the God realm and had the qualifications to establish one's Tao foundation, they could receive a copy. However, if this thing was placed in the 10,000 elephant sea, its value would be immeasurable. It would definitely cause the various major forces to fight for it. What did the peak sunshine experts in the 10,000 elephant sea lack? What they lacked was a method to establish one's Tao foundation. That was why those peak sunshine experts couldn't advance any further. When Juyen asked the fort lord about his cultivation, she had considered asking him how to establish one's Tao foundation. However, since she and Lu Yi had just arrived, it wasn't appropriate for her to ask about it. Who knew that the fort lord would give it to her directly? This might not be a big deal to the fort lord, but to Juyen it was an unimaginable gift. Lu Yi looked into it and found that the method to establish one's Tao foundation was called the furnace method. It required one to use one's own body as a furnace, fusing one's foundation into the furnace. Only by putting oneself in a desperate situation could one establish one's Tao foundation. Moreover, this method had special requirements for the environment. A normal starry sky didn't meet the requirements for establishing one's Tao foundation. It could only be used in a place covered by the aura of the Abyss star. Currently, the places covered by the aura of the Abyss star were the front lines of the battlefield. It wasn't easy to establish one's Tao foundation in such a dangerous environment. Moreover, the method itself was extremely dangerous. It required one to use one's own body as a furnace, fusing one's own foundation. It would be fine if it succeeded, but if it failed, all one's foundation would be burned away. The best outcome would be losing one's cultivation. Worse, the furnace would shatter and one's Tao would vanish. Jian could tell how dangerous this method was. After her excitement, her expression turned serious. The two stayed in the Thunder Battle Fortress for a few days. What Lu Yi was worried about finally happened. "Junior brother, I want to go to the front lines." Lu Yi knew that Juyen wouldn't be indifferent after obtaining the furnace method. This was her lifelong pursuit. Now that her hope was right in front of her, how could she turn a blind eye to it? If Lu Yi was in her shoes, he would make the same choice. Therefore, he didn't stop her. He nodded and said, "Let's go together." Jian said, "You should know why I want to go." "You." Lu Yi interrupted her. "Since you're already here, you can't just stay in the fortress and wait for death. If you want to establish your Tao foundation, you need someone to protect you." Juyen pursed her red lips. Just as Lu Yi knew he couldn't persuade her, she also knew she couldn't persuade Lu Yi. After a moment of silence, she said, "Thank you." Lu Yi shook his head. Going to the front lines wasn't just because of Jian. Even if Juyen didn't exist, he would still make the same choice. Since he had made his decision, he didn't hesitate. Soon, the two of them flew out together. Over the past few days, the woman had come again to distribute communication items to Lu Yi and Juyen, as well as to register the two of them, because it was very difficult for an ordinary communication object to display its usefulness after entering the area covered by the star abyss's aura. This starry sky cultivator had continuously experimented for the past 300 years. Combined with some information obtained from the star abyss's visitors, he had once again refined something similar to a musical note. Although the communication range of this object was limited in a place covered by the aura of the star abyss, it was at least much better than ordinary musical notes. The cultivators of the Thunder Battle Fort didn't have too many restrictions on entering the battlefield. Apart from some special operations that required some experts to lead the team, the cultivators were free to move as they wished. This was also why Lu Yi didn't see too many cultivators when he came here a few days ago. Most of the cultivators were on the battlefield. This stronghold was just a place for them to rest and recuperate. In this battlefield, there were hundreds of similar strongholds that served the same purpose. After leaving the stronghold, the two of them moved forward together. After only 2 hours, Lu Yi felt that he had entered a different world. The surrounding scenery didn't change at all, but it felt different. He knew that they had entered the edge of the battlefield because the aura of the star abyss was already here. The omnipresent aura of the star abyss had a strange, suppressive property. It didn't suppress the cultivator's strength, but other aspects. For example, the range of spiritual sense detection or the distance of sound transmission. The scope of this battlefield was extremely vast, and at the centermost area was that red, vortex-like star abyss door. When this star abyss gate first appeared, it couldn't be stopped in time. The rich aura of the star abyss spread out from the gate, eroding the starry sky of unity. It constantly spread out, causing the battlefield to grow larger and larger. Moreover, this expansion was maintained all the time. Because of this, the closer one got to the center of the battlefield, the richer the aura of the star abyss. And this aura of the star abyss was like water to the star abyss guests. Once those weak star abyss guests left the range of the aura of the star abyss, their strength would be greatly reduced. End of chapter. Chapter 2088. Star Abyss's aura had an extremely huge influence on the strength of Star Abyss guests. This was a piece of information recorded in the Jade Slip, especially those Star Abyss guests who had not cast their Tao foundation. If they broke away from the Star Abyss's aura's envelopment, the strength they could display would become no different from ordinary cultivators in a very short time. The strength of the 3 Star Abyss guests that appeared on the Wanxiang Sea was still fresh in Lu Ye's memory, especially that bull demon. He and Jian were no match for him even when they joined hands. But the other party could even resist the might of a treasure. That was too exaggerated. But following the Constellation Hall's projection sealing the Star Abyss Gate, the bull demon and the other 2 Star Abyss guests' powerful strength rapidly weakened. At that time, Lu Yu was not clear what was going on, but now he understood. The 3 of them from Star Abyss had not cast their Tao foundation. The Star Abyss Gate was sealed by the Constellation Hall's projection, so it rapidly weakened. Relatively speaking, those Star Abyss guests who cast their Tao foundation and entered the Tao realm did not rely so much on the Star Abyss's aura. Even if they left the range of the Star Abyss's aura, they could still be powerful for a period of time and would not weaken immediately. This was also the fundamental reason why the starry sky suffered great losses in the first 100 years. At that time, many Star Abyss guests who entered the Tao realm fled, bringing damage to various parts of the starry sky. The cultivators of this starry sky completely relied on human wave tactics to slowly grind them to death. The reason why the Star Abyss guest's strength had a strong dependence on the Star Abyss's aura was entirely because of a kind of mysterious power called Tao energy. This kind of mysterious power to Star Abyss was like the spiritual energy in the domain, omnipresent. As long as Star Abyss cultivators' cultivation reached the level of sunlight, they could refine this kind of power into the body during cultivation. When facing enemies, the power was unlimited. At that time, the bull demon's performance was so powerful because he used Tao energy. So even if Juyan's cultivation was a level higher than his, she was still not his match. But following the Constellation Hall's power to seal the Star Abyss Gate, the bull demon lost his connection with the Star Abyss. This kind of temporary Tao energy stored in the corporeal body became a rootless tree, immediately beaten back to its original form. Lu Yi secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, the bull demon did not enter the Tao realm. Otherwise, even with the Constellation Hall's power, the battle that day would not have ended so easily. To a super void cultivator, entering the Tao realm and not entering the Tao realm were 2 completely different kinds of existences. To the Star Abyss stranger, it was the same logic. As this information flashed through Lu Ye's mind, he transmitted a message to Jian. Senior sister, this is our first time here. Let's not delve too deep. Because of the dependence of the Star Abyss outsiders on the Star Abyss aura, it led to this large battlefield. The closer to the periphery, the weaker the enemy's strength would be. This was because those Star Abyss outsiders with relatively stronger strength were all unwilling to stay in the periphery. The thinner the Star Abyss aura, the more uncomfortable they would be. Although this matter was not absolute, No one could guarantee that a powerful Star Abyss stranger would suddenly run to the outskirts and wander around. But in the end, this gave the Super Void cultivators an opportunity to take advantage of. For cultivators at Jiu Yan's level, as long as they stayed in a place with the aura of the Star Abyss, they would have a chance to forge their own Tao foundation. In the past few hundred years, many cultivators had relied on this method to enter the Tao realm. Only then would they have the capital to fight against their enemies. Of course, Lu Yi hoped that Jian could forge her Taoist foundation in the safest way. As for himself, although he wanted to figure out what the so-called Tao energy was, his cultivation was not enough, so he had no hope of doing so. The few jade slips given by the fort master clearly mention that unless a super void cultivator forged their Taoist foundation and entered the Tao realm, they would not be able to touch upon Tao energy. This was different from the Star Abyss outsiders. As long as the Star Abyss outsiders' cultivation reached the level of sunshine, they would have this qualification. The reason was probably because the Star Abyss outsiders were born and grew up in the Star Abyss. The essence of their corporeal body was somewhat different from that of super void cultivators, and they could better accommodate the existence of Tao energy. Jiu Yan naturally understood what Lu Yi meant. She indeed could not wait to forge her Tao foundation, but she had never been a reckless person. She immediately nodded. Okay. Continuing forward, they did not see the figures of other cultivators. Obviously, because the battlefield was too large, the cultivators of this galaxy were scattered. Because the two were cautious, their speed was not fast, but the deeper they went into the battlefield, the thicker the aura of the Star Abyss around them. Although this aura could not be seen or touched, it could still be felt. The most intuitive feeling was that the range of Lu Ye's divine sense probing was much smaller than before. Suddenly, a black mass appeared in front of them. Lu Yi and Jiuyan sensed it almost at the same time. Looking up, Jiuyan immediately recognized what it was. A swarm of Star Abyss insects. Lu Yi immediately pulled her towards a floating continent not far away. Soon they arrived. With a sweep of their divine sense, they found a secluded place to hide. Then they set up a formation to conceal themselves and restrain their aura. The swarm of Star Abyss insects did not have much to do with the insect race. They were not sentient life forms. If one had to classify them, they were more like star beasts. The swarm of Star Abyss insects came in various forms, with some strong and some weak. They could be seen everywhere in the Star Abyss battlefield. It seemed that there were many of these insects in the Star Abyss. The swarm that appeared in this place shouldn't be too strong, but it was better to be safe than sorry. Lu Yi didn't dare act rashly before scouting out the situation. If this swarm had entered the Tao realm, he and Jiuyan would not be able to fight back. That split second of probing just now seemed to have attracted the swarm's attention. Not long after Lu Yi and Jiuyan had hidden themselves, the swarm followed their tracks and arrived near the floating continent. Upon closer inspection, Lu Yi discovered that the insects in this swarm looked like fist-sized mosquitoes. However, they were blood-red all over and looked extremely strange. At the center of the swarm was an especially large individual that was almost the size of a baby. This was clearly the king of the swarm. They circled around in all directions, but they never found it. This was the weakness of the swarm. No matter how strong they were, they had no intelligence. As long as they hid well, there would be no problem. Lu Yi cautiously probed for a bit before exchanging a glance with Jiuyan. The next moment, the two jumped out of their hiding places and circulated their magic power to cut off the swarm from the left and right. A moment later, the swarm was almost completely wiped out. Only the king was still fighting like a cornered beast. The king's aura was only at the early sunshine realm. Logically speaking, Lu Yi and Jiuyan should be able to kill such an existence easily. But in reality, the king had withstood 3 fierce attacks from the two without suffering a single injury. It undoubtedly possessed Tao force. It was that strange Tao force that had blocked Lu Yi and Julian's attacks. However, it was only an early sunshine stage insect king, so it didn't have much Tao energy stored in its body. 3 times seemed to be its limit, and its Tao energy was completely depleted. As Lu Ye's mountain blade slashed down, the originally indestructible insect king was cut in half like a piece of paper. Lu Yi sheathed his blade and raised his brows. It's about the same as what was recorded in the jade slip. Julian nodded. Indeed. This was also why the 2 of them had come out with Heart's telepathy just now. They wanted to personally verify the accuracy of the information recorded in the jade slip. From the looks of it, after hundreds of years of fighting, this place already had a very deep understanding of the Star Abyss stranger. "Let's continue," Jin said, and led the way into the depths of the battlefield. The stronger the Star Abyss stranger's aura was, the more beneficial it would be for her to forge her Tao foundation. But on the other hand, it was also more dangerous. Thus, she had to choose a suitable location. Along the way, they encountered a few more fights, except for a few who weren't strong enough. The rest were all at the early Sunshine Realm. Lu Yi and Jian couldn't do anything to these enemies before they exhausted their Tao force. But once they exhausted their Tao force, they could easily kill them. A few days later, a fierce battle came to an end. Lu Yi looked down at the wound on his waist and abdomen. It wasn't a big deal. He looked up at Jian and asked, "Are you all right?" Jian shook her head slowly. She stared at the enemy lying in a pool of blood not far away and said, "Let's do it here." The enemy they encountered this time was at the Middle Sunshine Realm. It was extremely fast. Otherwise, Lu Yi wouldn't have been injured. Fortunately, it was only a flesh wound. It was completely different from the early Sunshine Realm cultivators they encountered before. This enemy fought with them for a whole incense stick's worth of time before his Tao force was exhausted. Based on the situation and the records in the jade slip, the 2 of them wouldn't be able to defeat an enemy at the Late Sunshine Realm. The Late Sunshine Realm was at the level of the Bull Demon. Thus, this place was basically the limit of where the 2 of them could go. There was a small desolate star nearby. The 2 of them went up and found a secluded spot. Jian sat down cross-legged and entered a state of cultivation. Lu Yi didn't rest. He started to set up various formations around them. After working for 2 days, he finally took a break. Lu Yi also sat down not far from Jian. With the formation as a warning, he didn't have to worry too much. If anything broke into the range of the formation, he would be able to detect it immediately. While Jian was cultivating, he had nothing to do. He couldn't help but check on the talent tree. After the talent tree turned into a fire seed, it still hadn't finished its transformation. It had been too long. But this time, Lu Yi found that the fire seed seemed to have changed a lot. In the blazing fire, the small sapling had become much clearer. This was undoubtedly good news. Lu Yi felt that the talent tree's transformation might not be far away. He secretly looked forward to it. Lu Yi calmed his mind and focused. Using the most ancient method, he absorbed the spiritual energy around him and meditated. Although the information recorded in the jade slip was correct, he still couldn't help but want to try it. Through this method, he wanted to see if he could obtain the so-called Tao force. His cultivation aptitude wasn't bad. It could even be said that it was excellent. However, because he had always cultivated with the help of the talent tree, he had never used this method. As he breathed, the thin spiritual energy around him flowed into his body. Through the conversion of his spiritual source, it turned into Tao force. End of chapter. Chapter 2089. Half a day later, Lu Yi stopped cultivating because he found that there were many impurities in his magic power that could not be refined and would pollute his body. This was obviously related to the Star Abyss Chi. Lu Yi suspected that the impurities were the Star Abyss Chi. Since there was such a problem, he naturally could not cultivate anymore. Otherwise, his magic power would become more and more turbid, and his strength would become weaker. He could only polish the soul-subduing secret technique. Time flew and 2 months passed. The two hid in a good place. During these 2 months, they did not encounter any disturbances. There were a few times when there were sounds of fighting nearby, but Lu Yi did not pay attention to it. On this day, Ju Yan, who had been in a state of cultivation, slowly opened her eyes. Lu Yi sensed something and quickly turned to look at her. Jiu Yan looked at him and shook her head. Lu Yi knew that she should not have made much progress in these 2 months. He comforted her, take it slow. According to the records in the Jade Slip, it is not easy to cast the Tao Foundation. Some people took more than 10 years to succeed, and the shortest record was half a year. Senior sister, you only took 2 months. That is true, but Jiu Yan was a little disappointed. These 2 months of cultivation weren't completely fruitless. According to the records of the furnace method, she was trying to cast her Tao Foundation. However, the progress was very slow. At this rate, she didn't know how many years it would take for her to become a furnace and fuse her entire foundation. She and Lu Yi were now stranded here. Although the Thunder Battle Fort had accepted them, they were not cultivators of the 1 yuan starry sky. They had no one to rely on. She wanted to become stronger as soon as possible. Only then could she have a certain degree of self-protection in this environment. Her expression became firm. Junior brother, I want to go deeper. Lu Yi pondered for a moment, then stood up and said, then let's go. Jiu Yan stopped him and looked at him seriously. I will go alone. You go back to the Thunder Battle Fort. If Lu Ye's cultivation was the same as hers, qualified to cast the Tao Foundation, they would naturally help each other. However, Lu Yi was only in the early sunshine realm. He was still far from her level. She did not want Lu Yi to take the risk with her. Lu Yi blinked. Senior sister, you're underestimating me. In terms of cultivation, I'm indeed inferior to you. But if we're talking about methods to fight enemies, I have 2 attribute treasures in my possession. Jiu Yan still wanted to say something, but he was no longer willing to listen. He took the lead and flew forward, calling out to Jiu Yan, let's go. This was the first time Jiu Yan had seen such a domineering side to Lu Yi. She was stunned for a moment. Seeing Lu Yi walk further and further away, she hurriedly chased after him. Junior brother, you don't have to take the risk. Lu Yi tilted her head to look at her and smiled. Then let's part ways here. If I go this way, where will senior martial sister go? I'm serious. Jiu Yan was a little annoyed. Shoo, there's movement. Lu Yi suddenly raised a finger to his lips. Jiu Yan was shocked. He quickly looked around, but found nothing. When he turned around, Lu Yi had already run far away. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Due to the limitations of their strength, Lu Yi and Jiu Yan moved cautiously. Their speed was not fast. Whenever they sensed the commotion of a fight, the 2 of them would immediately find a place to hide. Lu Yi couldn't help but feel a little apprehensive. Ever since he started cultivating, he had never experienced days of being on tenterhooks, afraid that an unrivaled expert would suddenly appear nearby. Fortunately, their luck was pretty good. They didn't encounter a single battle for half a month. There were a few times when they encountered enemies who could fight them, but they still avoided them, afraid that the aftermath of the battle would attract even stronger experts. Half a month later, the Star Abyss's aura was undoubtedly more than twice as strong as before. There were already late Sunshine Star Abyss experts here. Both Jiu Yan and Lu Yi knew that this was the true limit. If they went any further, they would be courting death. There was no telling when they would run into someone who had forged their Tao Foundation. Enemies of that level weren't something they could fight against at their current stage. Lu Yi found a floating continent formed from a star fragment. There was a huge hole in it that extended in all directions. It was a natural place to hide. Jiu Yan was obviously very satisfied with this place. Just like before, she found a place to cultivate. Lu Yi set up a concealment array and sat not far from her. This way, They could help each other in time if there were any problems. Lu Yi didn't know how Jiu Yan was doing. He was polishing the soul-subduing secret technique while thinking about something. It was about Ma Bin. Ma Bin had forged his Tao foundation. Lu Yi didn't know how Ma Bin had done it. Based on the information he had, it was impossible to do it without coming into contact with the Star Abyss's aura. But Ma Bin had indeed done it. That was why he was so strong. But Ma Bin didn't seem to have the kind of strength he should have. Take this front-line battlefield, for example. Experts who had forged their Tao foundation were simply crushed by starry sky cultivators who didn't even have Tao power. The latter were like ants in front of the former, unable to resist. But Ma Bin didn't seem right. He was strong, but he was only a little stronger than Changfeng and Jiu Yan. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been injured when he was besieged by Changfeng and the others. Lu Yi thought about it for a long time. He felt that this was a problem with Tao power. Ma Bin had indeed forged his own Tao foundation, but he probably didn't have much Tao power. That was why he was so strong. He wasn't even as strong as the ox monster. That ox monster didn't have a Tao foundation, but he had Tao power. Thinking about it this way, Lu Yi faintly felt that the Tao foundation was more like a container for Tao power. Ma Bin had this container, but it was empty. That was why he couldn't display his strength. But if this container was damaged, why did it have to be repaired in the spirit jade mine? Logically speaking, if one's Tao foundation was damaged, only Tao power could repair it. Was there Tao power in the spirit jade mine? Lu Yi had entered and exited the spirit jade mine more than once. Now that he thought about it, he suddenly remembered something. Vein source. Every spirit jade vein had its own vein source, and there was more than one. The larger the spirit jade vein, the more vein sources there would be. The spirit jades and spirit crystals were all nurtured near the vein sources. He had examined the vein sources before and found that there seemed to be a mysterious power hidden within. It was a power that he could not understand. Maybe that was Tao power? So that's how it was. Tao power existed in the starry sky, but ordinary cultivators didn't have the chance to come into contact with it. Even if Lu Yi could come into contact with it, he wouldn't be able to comprehend it. Also, vein sources shouldn't be the only vein sources that had Tao power in the starry sky. Treasures and attribute treasures should all have Tao power. Lu Yi had used the power of the sword gourd to attack the bull monster. Although he had blocked the attack, Lu Yi still remembered the bull monster's words. At that time, the bull monster had been very angry and had said, "How dare you damage my Tao power?" Therefore, the power displayed by the treasure also contained the power of the Tao. This explained why the power of the treasure was so strong. Ordinary sunshine couldn't resist it at all. If attribute treasures were so powerful, then true treasures must be even more powerful. After all, attribute treasures were just derivatives of true treasures. True treasures were the condensation of Tao. Lu Yi was enlightened. Suddenly, a violent tremor broke Lu Ye's train of thought. He hurriedly checked his surroundings. When he realized what was happening, his face fell. There were strong cultivators fighting nearby. Judging from the aura that spread out, both sides were at the late stage of the Sunshine Realm. They were about the same as the bull monster, maybe even stronger. Ordinary late-stage Sunshine cultivators wouldn't be able to create such a big aftermath. Therefore, Lu Yi immediately concluded that both of them had Tao power. They weren't starry sky cultivators, but two strangers from Star Abyss fighting. This was very common. According to the many years of observation of starry sky cultivators, the strangers from Star Abyss didn't get along peacefully. They fought and killed each other even more frequently than starry sky cultivators. If one really counted, only 30% of the strangers from Star Abyss who died in the front-line battlefield were killed by starry sky cultivators. The remaining 70% were killed by each other. The aura of Star Abyss was evil. The creatures born from Star Abyss seemed to be born bloodthirsty and cruel. They were synonymous with destruction. Jian also opened her eyes. In the darkness, the two looked at each other and restrained their aura to avoid being detected by the two strangers from Star Abyss. Similar situations had happened several times in the past few months, but they never affected the two. However, their good luck seemed to have run out this time. The aftermath of the fierce battle was getting closer and closer. Soon, it reached the floating continent where the two were hiding. "Let's go!" Lu Yi knew they couldn't hide any longer. Once the floating continent shattered, the two would be exposed. It was better to take advantage of this opportunity to leave. As soon as he finished speaking, he and Juyen flew out together. But it was too late. The battle between the two strangers from Star Abyss engulfed the floating continent. Under the violent power, the floating continent shattered. Lu Yi and Jian desperately urged their magic power, but they couldn't maintain their balance. They were both tossed up and down by the violent aftermath. Juyen grabbed Lu Ye's hand in a timely manner, not letting him leave her side. She desperately urged her own power and stabilized her body with great difficulty. When she looked up again, her eyes were filled with despair. At some point, a figure had appeared in front of them. It was an insectoid. Although this guy had a human body, he had a sinister mandible. His whole body was stained with blood, and the thick carapace on the surface of his body showed many signs of shattering. He was also carrying a limp, badly mangled body in his hand. Clearly, the battle just now had already determined life and death. This insectoid was the victor, and the corpse in his hand was the spoils of war. The insectoid had 2 pairs of eyes on his face. Under his normal eyelids was a pair of long, narrow eyes. He gloomily stared at Juyen and Lu Yi. Then he raised the corpse in his hand and put it to his mouth, biting it until his mouth was full of blood. End of chapter. Chapter 2090. The battles between the Star Abyss guests would often end with one side being devoured by the other. It seemed that, through this method, the winner could obtain some unknown benefits. As for what kind of benefits it was, even the Thunder Battle Fort did not know. However, there was speculation in the past that those who died in battle had not exhausted their Dao energy, and the winner could use this method to recover their Dao energy. However, after some cultivators from the Thunder Battle Fort tried to do this, they realized that it was useless. Instead, it disgusted them. Now that the insectoid had one, it opened its ferocious mouth and bit off the head of its opponent's corpse. As it chewed, blood flowed from the corner of its mouth, and its long and narrow compound eyes shone with a cold light. Jiuyan's Fa Li surged fiercely. She raised her hand and grabbed at the void. A silver spear appeared in her hand. She turned into a stream of light and attacked the insect. Before she arrived, the spear was like a waterfall, covering the void in front of her. Of course, she knew that she was no match for this insect. Judging from the aftermath, just now, the insect's strength was even stronger than the bull demon that appeared on the 10,000 Phenomenon Sea. If it was a normal encounter, she would not have any chance of survival. But right now, it was an opportunity. Because this insect had just fought a life and death battle with an enemy. Even though he killed the other Star Abyss alien, he himself also suffered injuries that were not light. Most importantly, that degree of intense battle would definitely have an extremely great consumption on his Dao power. Otherwise, his appearance would not be so wretched. It was impossible to escape, so she could only fight to the death. There might be a chance of survival. The insect, who was eating heartily, suddenly opened his mouth and roared silently. Layers of ripples visible to the naked eye spread and covered Jiu Yan's body. When Jiu Yan fell into the ripples, she immediately felt as if she had broken into an invisible barrier. Her speed was greatly reduced, and even the power of her spear became much weaker. She clenched her teeth and took a deep breath. She madly urged her Fa Li, and even her soul power erupted fiercely at this moment. In an instant, she finally broke through the barrier in front of her. Her spear pierced towards the insect's open mouth. However, this attack did not work. Just as this attack was about to succeed, the insect suddenly threw away the spoils in his hand and punched the tip of the spear. Jiu Yan's figure suddenly stopped. She almost couldn't hold her magic treasure spear. Her hands burned with pain, and she was sent flying. The insectoids were about to give chase when they suddenly turned to look at Lu Yi. At this moment, Lu Ye's face was solemn. He took out his sword gourd, opened it, and aimed it at the insectoids. He channeled his mana, and a sword light shot out from the gourd, like lightning. If Jiu Yan was aware of this, Lu Yi was naturally aware of it as well. Hence, the moment Jiu Yan made her move, Lu Yi had already made his preparations. If they wanted to live today, it was unrealistic to escape immediately. The only way was for the two of them to work together and fight against the other party. They could either find an opportunity to kill the other party or find an opportunity to escape. It's a treasure. His normal eyes looked at the sword gourd with a greedy expression, as if he had seen some great treasure. The sword light attacked, and the insectoids did not dare to be careless. He did not care about Lu Yi and Jiu Yan because he could sense that the two of them did not have Tao energy. They were just ordinary starry sky cultivators. Such cultivators, no matter how strong they were like ants in front of him. But treasures were different. The power of treasures could cause him harm. Moreover, once the power of treasures was activated, if he was not prepared in advance, he could not avoid it. He could only resist. In a hurry, the insectoids steadied their bodies and channeled their mana to protect themselves. The sword light stabbed the surface of his body, but was blocked by his mana. It was just like the scene when Lu Yi faced the ox monster on the 10,000 Elephant Sea. At that time, Lu Yi was very surprised that the ox monster could hone his mana to such a level. But now he knew that this was not a problem of mana, but of Tao energy. The sword light became more and more resplendent, and the insectoids roared to resist. Jiu Yan attacked again. Although her chi and blood were shaken just now, it was not serious. Seeing the insectoids being harassed by the sword light, she naturally would not miss this opportunity. Scram! The insectoid was getting impatient. While resisting the sword light, he threw a punch at Jiu Yan from afar. Jiu Yan, who was rushing over, paused. His protective mana had been shattered by this punch. He was extremely shocked. One had to know that this was just a casual punch from the insectoid, and there was still some distance between them. Yet it was still so powerful. If he had been hit by this punch at close range, he would have died on the spot. The moment her protective mana was shattered, another layer of light appeared on Jiu Yan's body. It was obvious that her protective magic treasure had taken effect. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Jiu Yan rushed forward. She channeled her powerful cultivation into her spear and stabbed it out viciously. It went straight for the insectoid's waist. However, even the sword light from the sword gourd could not break through her opponent's defense. How could her attack be effective? The spear seemed to have pierced into an extremely tough force field. Very quickly, it was stopped in its tracks. It did not even touch the insectoid skin. Jiu Yan did not give up. She channeled her power with all her might because she knew that this was the best opportunity to exhaust her opponent's Tao energy. However, after 3 breaths, Jiu Yan had no choice but to retreat. This was because the insectoids had developed killing intent in their anger. They turned their heads and looked at her. It was obvious that they wanted to get rid of her first. Almost at the same time that Jiu Yan retreated, the resplendent sword light suddenly shattered. The power of the sword gourd could no longer be maintained. Only then did the insectoids retract their gaze from Jiu Yan. Compared to killing Jiu Yan, he wanted to obtain the treasure in Lu Ye's hands more. To all the guests of the Star Abyss, treasures were very useful. By borrowing the power of the treasures, they could obtain additional Tao energy and have a faster growth rate. Just as he took a step forward, the insectoids were shocked to find that Lu Yi had released a ball of fire. It swept towards him. The terrifying power contained in the fire was not the slightest bit inferior to the sword light from before. Although the gourd in Lu Ye's hands did not look any different from the previous one, the insectoids were still keenly aware of something. Another treasure? Attribute treasures were not cabbages, although they were derivatives of most valuable treasures. Regardless of whether it was in the starry skies or the star abyss, their numbers could not be considered large. For a cultivator to be able to possess a single attribute treasure was already an enormous fortune. Now, there was actually a situation where a single person possessed 2 attribute treasures. He was overjoyed and almost laughed out loud. There was only one thought in his mind. Mine, they're all mine. But soon he realized that things were not good. Because his Tao energy was severely depleted, whether or not he could block the power of the second treasure was another matter. But now that Lu Yi had activated the might of the fire gourd, he could not retreat at all. He could only grit his teeth and madly urge his strength. A ball of fire fell on the insectoid's body, instantly igniting him and turning him into a ball of fire. But even though he was enveloped by the might of the fire gourd, the insectoid still managed to rush in front of Lu Yi. With 2 treasures in front of him, he had to take them first. As for the might of the fire gourd, as long as his Tao energy was not exhausted, it would not cause him any harm. He could sense that Lu Ye's cultivation was not high. At the very least, with such a cultivation, he should not appear in such a position. But when he really attacked Lu Yi, he realized that Lu Ye's cultivation was not high, but he was very agile. He attacked several times, but he still could not take him down. Lu Yi was helpless. After activating the might of the fire gourd, he was ready to call Jiu Yan and escape together. Whether or not the insectoids could block the might of the fire gourd, the aftermath of the battle had already spread. Naturally, they could not stay here for long. While the insectoids were distracted by the might of the fire gourd, they might have a chance to escape. But who knew that the insectoids would target him, making it impossible for him to leave? He could only rely on his flying technique to avoid the insectoids. He did not dare to face them head-on. After all, the power of the burning fire gourd did not distinguish between friend and foe. If he accidentally touched it, he would not have a good time. At the moment, he did not have a talent tree to use. Jiu Yan, who was not far away, was anxious. Faced with this situation, she did not have any good ideas. She could only take out a magic treasure and attack from afar, shooting out beams of light to obstruct the insectoids. After a dozen breaths of time, the flames suddenly dissipated and the insectoids reappeared. Almost at the same time, a beam of light hit the insectoid's body. It was Jiu Yan's attack. The beam of light hit the insectoid's chest, causing them to stagger. A large wound appeared on their chest, and blood flowed out. Jiu Yan was stunned. Then she suddenly realized, he's exhausted his Tao energy. As she spoke, she charged forward with her spear. Lu Yi also noticed this. His body moved like a ghost, and he appeared beside the insectoids. He unsheathed his mountain pan saber and slashed down. There was the faint sound of a beast roaring, and the phantom of a giant beast appeared. It opened its bloody mouth. It bared its fangs. The insectoids, who were in a sorry state, suddenly turned their heads and coldly stared at him. The corners of their lips curled up in a strange arc, and they reached out to grab him. Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat. The insectoid's injury just now was a show of weakness. The sharp claws pierced through the phantom of the beast, causing it to collapse. Then they easily broke through Lu Ye's protective magic power and fiercely clawed at him. Lu Yi felt a burst of pain from his chest. Not only that, but there seemed to be an extremely strange power penetrating his chest and invading his body. As he hurriedly retreated, he broke out in a cold sweat. Fortunately, he noticed something was wrong in time. Otherwise, even if he didn't die, he would have been seriously injured. Now, only a lump of flesh on his chest had been torn off, so it wasn't too big of a problem. However, that didn't mean he was out of danger. The insectoid's attack didn't succeed, and they immediately chased after him like maggots. An unprecedented sense of danger enveloped his body. In that instant, even the flow of time around him seemed to slow down. Lu Yi looked past the insectoids and saw Jiu Yin anxiously rushing over to help him. However, she was still some distance away and wouldn't make it in time. In a hurry, Lu Yi flicked his fingers, and drop after drop of blood flew toward the insectoids. In the blink of an eye, he had summoned 4 drops of blood. He didn't even have time to have the blood transform into doppelgangers before a terrifying and powerful force exploded from the blood. For balls of bloody light exploded at almost the same time, enveloping the insectoids. The huge impact sent Lu Yi flying, and the injury on his chest became even more serious. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2091. Barely managing to stabilize himself, Lu Yi felt the blood in his body churning. His throat tasted sweet, and his mouth was full of the taste of blood. Looking over, his expression was solemn. This was because the insectoid didn't suffer any damage after withstanding the power of 4 drops of treasure blood's self-destruction. The other party obviously had Tao energy protecting him. This battle had made the insectoid extremely impatient. He gritted his teeth and growled, "Damn scum! Why are you so tenacious? Can't you just die?" He had never suffered such a big loss in front of an ordinary starry sky cultivator. After fighting with the previous powerful enemy, he did not have much Tao energy left, and after fighting with Lu Yi and Jian, his Tao energy was almost exhausted to the point of exhaustion. Even though the living beings of Star Abyss had special physiques, even if they hadn't established their Tao foundation, so long as their cultivation was sufficient, they had the qualifications to accumulate Tao energy. But comparatively speaking, it was much more difficult for them who hadn't established their Tao foundation to accumulate Tao energy, as compared to those that had entered the Tao realm. Every strand of Tao energy was extremely precious to him, and it was the foundation of his standing in this battlefield, and he couldn't easily lose it. In his anger, his killing intent became more and more condensed. As long as he could obtain 2 attribute treasures this time, the Tao energy he consumed would be replenished sooner or later. With this as a foundation, he even had the chance to cast his own Tao foundation and become a true Tao realm powerhouse. Raising his eyes and coldly looking at Lu Yi, the insectoid closed in on him step by step. "I don't believe you have a 3rd attribute treasure." Although he asked this, he was also a little scared. If Lu Yi really took out a 3rd attribute treasure, he would immediately turn around and flee. As he spoke, he didn't even look and threw a punch. Jian, who was rapidly approaching, snorted and flew back at an even faster speed. "Die!" As if seeing that Lu Yi was at his wit's end, he didn't delay any longer and suddenly increased his speed. At this moment, a bloody light suddenly bloomed from Lu Ye's side. The bloody light suddenly spread out, turning into a sea of blood. "HM, you're a vampire?" The insectoid appeared to be incomparably astonished, as if he had never thought that he would encounter a blood race here. However, his movements did not stop at all. The creatures in Star Abyss, not to mention that they were not of the same race, even if they were of the same race, they did not have much trust and reliance. The chaotic, disorderly, and cruel environment had created a majority of the creatures in Star Abyss who only relied on themselves. Therefore, even if the other party was a vampire, he wouldn't hesitate in the slightest when faced with 2 treasures. In a flash, he arrived in front of Lu Yi and punched out. He let out a long sigh. "It's over." Lu Yi raised his Pan-Shan saber in front of him to block the attack, but at the same time his body slid back uncontrollably. The insectoid was shocked. How is that possible? A starry sky cultivator with such a weak cultivation actually managed to block his casual strike? One had to know that he had used a little bit of his Tao power in this attack. This undoubtedly made him feel that it was inconceivable. However, he soon realized that something was wrong because there was more than one aura in the sea of blood. There were 5 other auras around him, and every single one of them was the same as his opponent. It could be said that they were made from the same mold. Treasured blood clones? The insectoid quickly realized the truth. He had dealt with many vampires before, so he naturally knew about their treasured blood clones. But how could there be so many of them? There were also a few drops of unusual blood that had exploded before, which should also be treasured blood. If he counted them, there would be even more of them. He didn't even notice when Lu Yi had summoned his treasured blood clones. He knew that this was definitely done when the other party spread out the sea of blood. Within the thick sea of blood, Lu Ye's main body and his 5 treasured blood clones had already formed a black tortoise formation. During the transformation of his talent tree, he couldn't use the twin chi-linked branch spirit patterns. However, the treasured blood clones were part of Lu Yi, so even without the assistance of spirit patterns, the main body and the clones could easily connect and form a formation. This was the strongest method he could use aside from his treasures. The insectoid was definitely a spent force, and this battle had already reached the point of life and death. Of course, he had to give it his all. The only reason he was able to block the insectoid's attack was because of the power of the formation. This was equivalent to 6 Lu Yes forming a formation. With the main body strength alone, it definitely wouldn't be that easy. Although the insectoids were unwilling to accept the fact that they did not succeed in their first attack, they knew that the situation was hopeless and decided to retreat. However, how could it be so easy for him to leave in the sea of blood? Moreover, he was completely enveloped by the black tortoise formation. Sensing the change in the insectoid's state of mind, Lu Ye's heart was set, and he took the initiative to launch an attack. In an instant, the sea of blood was turbulent, and violent power wantonly swept through it. Jiao Yan also rushed back, breaking into the sea of blood. With the assistance of Lu Yi, she displayed her ability to launch sneak attacks. Every time the insectoid had no time to pay attention to other things, she brazenly attacked. 30 breaths later, the sea of blood receded, and 3 figures appeared from within. Lu Ye's face was pale as he sheathed his blade. Jiu Yan stood not far away with her silver spear, looking exhausted. Ever since she started cultivating, she had never experienced such a bitter battle. In this battle, she once again felt the terror of Tao energy. The insectoid's head had been separated from his body, and the wound on his neck was neat. Obviously, it was caused by the mountain pan Tao. After his Tao energy was exhausted, his strength wasn't that strong. "Let's go." Lu Yi called out to Jiu Yan, who rushed to his side and supported him with one hand, then quickly fled into the distance. Both of them had expended a great deal of energy, but in comparison, Jiu Yan's condition was undoubtedly much better. She felt extremely ashamed because the main force of this battle was actually Lu Yi, whose cultivation was even weaker. She had not been of much use in this battle. 2 hours later, the two landed on a huge floating continent and looked for a place to hide. There was no time to rest. Jiu Yan immediately took out a formation plate and set up a formation nearby. She wasn't very proficient in the Tao of formations, but she could still set up simple ones. This was a skill that almost every cultivator who had reached a certain level of cultivation would be able to master, because everyone had to work alone at some point. "How are you?" Jiu Yan looked at Lu Yi nervously. Lu Ye's condition wasn't good. His forehead was dripping with sweat, and his clothes were completely soaked. His face was so pale that there wasn't a trace of blood in it. This clearly wasn't because he had expended too much energy in the previous battle. As she spoke, Jiu Yan glanced at the wound on his chest. A large chunk of flesh was missing, and she could almost see the bone. With Lu Ye's constitution, this kind of injury should have been able to recover very quickly. However, after being injured by the insect race, not only did the wound not heal, it even showed signs of worsening. "Tao energy entered my body." Lu Yi gritted his teeth and replied, his whole body trembling uncontrollably. Jiu Yan's face suddenly turned pale. Although she had expected this to be the case, she still found it hard to accept after receiving confirmation. According to the Thunder Battle Fort's records, once Tao energy entered the body of an ordinary starry sky cultivator, it would be an unsolvable situation. There was no way to resolve it unless they could find a Tao realm expert to help. Even then, there was still a lot of risk because different types of Tao energy clashed inside the body. Let's go back to the Thunder Battle Fort. I'll take you back, Jiu Yen said and helped Lu Yi up. Only by returning to the Thunder Battle Fort and finding help would Lu Yi have any hope of survival. It's too late. Lu Yi waved his hand. With their current position, even if they rushed back at full speed, it would take them a few days to return to the Thunder Battle Fort. This was without considering the dangers they might encounter on the way. Jiu Yen obviously realized this problem and was at a loss for a moment. Suddenly, she thought of something and hurriedly said, "Then I will go out and look. Maybe I can find a Tao realm expert in the Thunder Battle Fort." Lu Yi grabbed her and slowly shook his head. "Don't go out. Don't worry. I should be fine." "How can it be fine?" Jiu Yan's voice trembled. She only thought that Lu Yi was comforting her. She stared at Lu Yi for a while and suddenly lowered her head. She said in a disappointed and self-blaming tone, "I am useless." If she could cast her Tao foundation and enter the Tao realm, then this problem wouldn't be a problem. The two of them wouldn't have to fight so hard against the insect race. It was as if an invisible needle had pierced into her heart. It was painful. Her eyes became blurry and wet, seeing her like this. Lu Yi knew that no matter how he explained, Jiu Yen wouldn't believe him. He sighed helplessly. "Senior sister, don't go. Just stay with me." Whether it was going back to the Thunder Battle Fort or going out to find a Tao realm expert, it was unrealistic. He had to keep her here. Jiu Yen raised her head. Her eyes were red and her red lips were bleeding from biting. She nodded heavily. "Okay." Lu Yi closed his eyes and immersed his mind to check the talent tree kindling in his source spiritual cavity. At this moment, the Tao energy that invaded his body gathered around the kindling. As if stimulated by this external Tao energy, the kindling burst out with a more dazzling luster than before. The little sapling in the kindling swayed crazily and showed signs of breaking out of the kindling. Lu Yi didn't know why this was happening, but the talent tree kindling was obviously reacting to the Tao energy. The reason why he told Jiu Yen that he would be fine was because of this abnormality. The Tao energy that invaded his body, no matter what kind of energy it was still an external force. As long as the talent tree completed its transformation, it could be burned to ashes. He had confidence in the talent tree. As he observed, the little sapling in the kindling became clearer and clearer. The entire kindling seemed to have undergone some subtle changes. Lu Yi was happy, although he was sure that the talent tree's transformation would end soon. The Tao energy from the insect tribe seemed to have sped up the process. His heart skipped a beat. Was the 4 transformations of the talent tree related to Tao energy? Otherwise, how could there be such a change? Before he could figure it out, Lu Yi felt a warm and soft body pressing against him. When he opened his eyes, he found that Jiu Yen was sitting beside him and hugging him. "Are you cold?" Jiu Yen asked in a choked voice. Lu Yi was stunned. When he reacted, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Because of the pain from the Tao energy invasion, he was trembling. Jiu Yen must have misunderstood something. Jiu Yen looked like she wanted to accompany him to the end of his life. End of chapter. Chapter 2092. I'm not cold. Lu Yi slowly shook his head. His teeth were chattering, and his upper teeth were knocking against his lower teeth. Then he felt Jiu Yen hug him even tighter. At this juncture, he couldn't say too much, so he simply closed his eyes. After a while, a soft hum sounded in his ears. It seemed to be a small tune, and the melody was simple and gentle. Lu Yi had never heard it before, but he knew that it was a lullaby to coax a child to sleep. It was hard to imagine that a powerhouse like Jiu Yen would hum such a tune. A scene involuntarily appeared in his mind. The young Chu Shen was restless in his sleep, and Ju Yan coaxed him like this. The gentle tune flowed gently, and Ju Yan's heart ached even more. She could clearly feel that Lu Ye's trembling body slowly calmed down until there was no more movement after a while. At the same time, Lu Ye's aura became extremely weak, almost undetectable. Lu Yi, Jiu Yan softly called out. Unknowingly, her face was covered in tears. There was no response. She bit her red lips and cried silently. Her cheek was pressed against Lu Ye's forehead. Indescribable sadness completely drowned her body and mind, making her feel like she was being torn apart. She couldn't understand why this was in the ghost palanquin. She had clearly told Lu Yi that Hansi Ai was long gone, and that Hansi's matter had nothing to do with her. She firmly believed so in her heart. She once thought that she could follow this idea, but it was only at this moment that she realized that she had never faced her own heart. After all, some things could only be truly understood after experiencing it, but it was often too late. Jiu Yan's emotions fluctuated, but Lu Yi was completely unaware. At this moment, all his mind was immersed in his source spiritual cavity. Stimulated by the Tao energy that entered his body, the talent tree fire seed was rapidly undergoing some wonderful changes. The fire seed was actually emitting an extremely powerful devouring force, crazily devouring his foundation. This was also the reason why his aura was so weak that it was almost undetectable. Crack! The faint sound of something breaking rang out in the depths of his heart. When the fire seed cracked, the blazing talent tree finally reappeared. Lu Ye's tense state of mind suddenly relaxed. The fourth metamorphosis was complete. The transformation of the talent tree this time was completely different from the previous 3 times. The fire gourd obtained from the Yuan realm had helped a lot. Without the fire gourd, it would have taken Lu Yi a long time to realize the conditions required for the transformation of the talent tree. At the very least, the fire seed wouldn't devour his foundation in the past. But at the very least, the fire seed wouldn't devour his foundation. Lu Yi faintly felt that the completion of this transformation was probably not a normal process. It was because the fire seed had been stimulated by the Tao energy and accelerated its progress, so he had to pay a price. As a result, although his talent tree had completed its transformation, he was now extremely weak. The crucial moment had arrived. Could the talent tree that had undergone 4 transformations be able to burn away the Tao energy that had invaded his body? Under his observation, the talent tree was burning intensely, and Lu Yi could clearly feel that the fuel reserves were rapidly being consumed. Then, thick black smoke rose from the crown of the talent tree, and the Tao energy that invaded his body was like snowflakes under the blazing sun, quickly melting away. With the crisis resolved, Lu Ye's heart calmed down. A moment later, Lu Yi slowly opened his eyes. His extreme weakness made his vision blurry. He felt that even if a 3-year-old child stood in front of him and poked him with a finger, he would be knocked down. He couldn't see much, only a vaguely familiar face. He opened his mouth to speak, but found that his throat was dry, as if it was going to smoke. He wanted to send a voice transmission, but his spirit sea was almost depleted. The innate skill tree's fire seed had devoured everything. Lu Ye's magic power, soul power, and even his blood chi had all disappeared. He was only left with the most basic bit of vitality to keep himself alive. What do you want to say? Jiu Yan wiped away the tears on her face and leaned her ear close to Lu Ye's mouth. She couldn't figure out what was going on because Lu Ye's vitality was so dim that it seemed like it would be extinguished at any time. However, this state had been maintained for a while, which was inconceivable. In any case, there was still hope. Lu Yi was not really dead. Spirit. Pill. Lu Yi struggled for a long time before he finally squeezed out the 2 words, but his words were still unclear. Jiu Yan understood and quickly rummaged through her storage ring. She took out the best bottle of spirit pills, pinched one, and put it into Lu Ye's mouth. However, she soon found a problem because Lu Yi showed no signs of swallowing or chewing the pill. "You don't even have the strength to do this?" Jiu Yan's heart trembled. After pondering for a moment, she urged her magic power and took the pill from Lu Ye's mouth. She stuffed it into her own mouth, chewed it, and pressed her red lips on it. She gently placed her other hand on Lu Ye's throat and used her magic power to help Lu Yi swallow the pill. Once the pill entered his stomach, the talent tree's power was unleashed. The medicinal effect dissolved and merged with his body. Jiu Yan's expression changed because she found that Lu Ye's vitality, which was almost extinguished, seemed to be a little stronger. This was inconceivable, but it also made her excited. She quickly took out a few more spirit pills and stuffed them into her mouth, repeating the same process. The bottle of spirit pills was quickly consumed, and Jiu Yan took out another bottle. Time passed, and Lu Ye's vitality slowly recovered. Although it was not as strong as before, at least it was stable. When Jiu Yan fed him another spirit pill, she found that Lu Yi was quietly looking at her. His eyes were no longer cloudy and dull. Instead, they were bright and full of spirit. She quickly straightened her body and looked down at the wound on Lu Ye's chest. The originally frightening wound was now in a state of rapid recovery. Jiu Yan vaguely sensed it and lowered her head so that no one could see her expression. She then pushed the bottles of spirit pills in front of Lu Yi. "If there's no problem, you can recover on your own." She had no choice but to do what she did. At that time, she did not think too much about it. Saving Lu Ye's life was more important. Only now did she realize it. Moreover, although Lu Yi had not completely recovered, at least he had no problem taking spirit pills on his own. Of course, she could not do what she did before. "There's a problem," Lu Yi replied. "What problem?" Jiu Yan looked up nervously. Lu Yi hesitated for a moment before saying, "I'm very weak." Jiu Yan could not help but glare at him. The corners of Lu Ye's mouth twitched, and he sincerely said, "Thank you, senior sister." If Jiu Yan had not been by his side this time, he would have most likely died. Although the talent tree had left him with the most basic foundation to maintain his life, if he did not receive it in time, he would not have been able to maintain that state for long. Once the last bit of foundation had dissipated, he would have been doomed. Thanks to Jiu Yan, he was able to recover. Picking up the bottles of spirit pills in front of him, he did not even look at what they were and poured them all into his mouth. That was not all. Lu Yi took out a large number of spirit pills and swallowed them. Jiu Yan glanced at him from time to time, secretly shocked. In this world, there was no one who swallowed spirit pills like Lu Yi. Although spirit pills were good, swallowing too many in a short period of time would cause one's magic power to become turbid and affect one's strength. Afterwards, one would need to cultivate to purify it, which was a waste of time and energy. But considering Lu Ye's current state, Jiu Yan did not try to persuade him. No matter what, in this place it was more important to recover first. But what shocked her was that Lu Ye's actions were becoming more and more outrageous. At first, he only swallowed spirit pills. But as he ate, Jiu Yan saw him take out a few Yao cores and stuff them into his mouth, crunching them. Not only Yao cores, but also star beast cores. All kinds of outrageous scenes left Jiu Yan dumbfounded. After a while, Lu Yi seemed to grow impatient. He took out a large number of spirit jades and scattered them around him, piling them up into a small mountain and burying himself in them. Then, Jiu Yan discovered that the spiritual energy in the small mountain of spirit jades was rapidly being devoured by some kind of power and surging into Lu Ye's body, strengthening his aura. In just a few moments, the small mountain of spirit jades was completely consumed and turned into powder. Jiu Yan finally understood why Lu Ye's cultivation had risen so quickly. When Lu Yi first entered her sight, it was during the opening of the Constellation Hall. Lu Yi and Chu Xin had participated in the battle for the Constellation Hall. At that time, Lu Yi was only in the Constellation Hall. How many years had it been since then? The speed at which he refined spirit jades was so fast. As long as he had enough resources, his cultivation would definitely surpass ordinary people. Jiu Yan's shock aside, when Lu Yi recovered, he was also inspecting the transformed talent tree. Compared to before, the talent tree seemed to have undergone some changes, but he couldn't put his finger on it. On the surface, the talent tree didn't seem to have changed much, but Lu Yi could feel that the talent tree was no longer the talent tree of the past. As for the specific changes, he still needed to explore them. But the most obvious point was that the efficiency of refining resources had increased by a lot. He also tested the talent tree's ability to deduce spirit runes and found that it had also improved. But this wasn't the main point. According to Lu Ye's previous speculation, the talent tree's transformation this time had something to do with Dao energy, because it had obviously been stimulated by external Dao energy. In that case, Lu Yi focused his mind and activated the talent tree's power, constructing small spirit runes on the surface of his body. When he first stepped on the path of cultivation, he used this method to absorb the spirit chi of heaven and earth. But after the talent tree's second transformation, he hadn't used it for a long time. Now that he used it, he missed it very much. Countless small funnel-like spirit runes played their role. The surrounding star abyss's aura gathered and poured into his body. On the talent tree, gray smoke rose. Ordinary starry sky cultivators would never use this method to cultivate or recover their strength. Although the star abyss's aura was mixed with spirit chi, it was mostly impurities that starry sky cultivators couldn't refine. Lu Yi had experienced this before, but that was then, and this is now. The talent tree's transformation was completed. Lu Yi naturally wouldn't be afraid of those impurities. He wanted to verify a guess in his heart. I'm going out again today. End of chapter. Chapter 2093. Time passed. Under Lu Ye's careful observation, he found that the star abyss aura could be divided into 3 parts. The first part was the impurities that were burned by the talent tree, which were useless or even harmful to cultivators. The second part was normal spiritual energy. This kind of spiritual energy could be seen everywhere in the starry sky. Cultivators relied on this kind of spiritual energy to cultivate. As for the last part, Lu Yi didn't notice it at first because the existence of this part was too small. However, it did exist. What was strange was that this tiny part of existence actually merged into the talent tree as he refined and cultivated. It wasn't absorbed by the talent tree, but integrated into it. 2 hours later, Lu Yi found a small mark on a blank leaf of the talent tree. If he hadn't been concentrating on sensing, he wouldn't have noticed this change. After calming down and investigating, Lu Yi keenly felt that this small mark was the condensation of an extremely mysterious power. However, it was too small, so it wasn't easy to notice. This was Dao power. Although he had guessed it before, Lu Yi was still excited when his guess was confirmed. Because according to the information provided by the Thunder Battle Fort, he wasn't a creature born in the Star Abyss. Before he established his Dao foundation, he couldn't have his own Dao power. Only by establishing his Dao foundation and entering the Dao realm could he have Dao power enter his body. But now, relying on the uniqueness of the talent tree, he could break this rule by refining the Star Abyss aura. This had always been the unique advantage of the creatures of the Star Abyss. This thin bit of Dao power wasn't complete. Even if it was activated, it wouldn't bring much improvement to Lu Yi. However, this was a good start. This was a leap from nothing to something, a qualitative change. If he could possess more Dao energy, then his safety in the front lines of the battlefield would be greatly guaranteed. Slowly opening his eyes, Lu Yi said, "Senior sister, I want to cultivate for a while." Jiu Yan was startled for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, I'll protect you." At this moment, her expression had returned to normal, as if nothing had happened before. Lu Yi closed his eyes again and continued to maintain his previous state of cultivation. As time passed, the traces of Tao power on the leaves of the innate tree became clearer and more complete. After a full 10 days, Lu Yi finally obtained a complete trace of Tao energy. Under inspection, this trace of Tao energy was like a golden thread, flowing and swimming on the leaves like a living creature. Just by looking at it, one could feel the endless mysteries contained within, and the profound strength inside seemed to be able to evolve the principles of the world. Lu Yi finally understood why those strange visitors from the star abyss cherished their own Tao power so much. This thing was too difficult to cultivate. He relied on the power of the talent tree to construct countless small spirit gathering funnels on his body. The speed of his cultivation was beyond imagination, but even so, he still spent such a long time to obtain a trace of Tao power. The other cultivators would definitely take much longer than him, and once they encountered a battle, things like Tao energy were still very easily consumed. No wonder those Star Abyss's guests would eat the enemy's corpses to replenish themselves after a fierce battle. Of course, this was also related to the degree of density of the Star Abyss aura in this place. Although this place was not the edge of the battlefield, it was also not some central area. If one could be at a place where the Star Abyss aura was even denser, then the efficiency should be slightly higher. Even if it was difficult to cultivate, one still had to cultivate. After all, in this kind of place, Tao power was the foundation of one's existence. Lu Yi spent another 20 days and cultivated 2 more strands of Tao power before stopping. These 3 strands of Tao power gathered on the same leaf of the talent tree, looking like 3 golden fish swimming back and forth. This trip to the battlefield was mainly to help Zhu Yan forge her Tao foundation. He already had some progress on his side, so there was no need to be so anxious. He could go back and slowly cultivate to obtain more Tao power. He had to first nurture the power of the fire gourd and sword gourd. To deal with those strange visitors from the Star Abyss who possessed Tao power, the power of these 2 treasures was also very important. "Senior sister, I'm done here." Lu Yi opened his eyes and said to Zhu Yan. Zhu Yan turned her head and sized him up for a while, then nodded and closed her eyes to begin her own cultivation. Lu Yi thought for a moment, then took out a drop of treasure blood and transformed it into a clone that lay dormant outside to be vigilant at all times. His main body began to nurture the sword gourd and fire gourd. This matter was relatively simple. He only needed enough resources to complete it. As for the resources needed to nurture the 2 gourds, he had brought a lot of them with him, especially the fire gourd. On the giant red star, he had deliberately left enough flaming sun essence to nurture dozens of strange flames. After swallowing a large number of magic treasures of different quality, the sword gourd's sword qi gradually became complete. After the sword gourd finished nurturing, Lu Yi began to nurture the fire gourd. As the flaming sun essence swallowed, the strange flames in the fire gourd slowly grew. Lu Yi was about to put away the fire gourd when he suddenly thought of a question. Would the talent tree undergo another transformation? If it did, what were the conditions? Ordinary fire attribute resources obviously had no effect on the talent tree's transformation. They could only be used as fuel. The opportunity for the 4th transformation was to swallow a large number of strange flames. Would it also need this strange flame next time? His heart stirred. Lu Yi prepared to give it a try. In any case, it was just consuming a strange flame. As for whether or not this was the opportunity, he would know once he tried. Urging the talent tree, invisible roots probed into the gourd. However, in the next moment, Lu Ye's expression changed, and he hurriedly withdrew the talent tree's power. In that instant of contact, he felt that something was wrong. The talent tree seemed to want to devour the fire gourd. Thinking carefully, Lu Yi was sure that it wasn't an illusion. If he hadn't reacted quickly, the fire gourd would have been devoured by the talent tree. Even if it couldn't devour it completely in a short time, Once the fire gourd was damaged, its power would be greatly reduced. The talent tree that had undergone 4 transformations could actually devour treasures? Although he knew that the talent tree would undergo some unusual changes after this transformation. But he hadn't noticed it yet. Such a change was still unexpected. Frowning, Lu Yi didn't dare to let the talent tree have any direct contact with the fire gourd. Although he was sure that he would gain a lot of benefits after devouring the fire gourd was still very useful. He could only activate the fire gourd and release the mystical fire within it. Only after it was suspended in front of him did he activate the power of the talent tree. Invisible roots pierced into the mystical fire, and in an instant, the mystical fire disappeared without a trace. Lu Yi calmly sensed it and soon revealed a disappointed expression. The talent tree didn't have much of a reaction. It could even be said that there was no reaction. This undoubtedly meant that even if it could transform again, the opportunity wasn't the strange flame. Just as he was thinking this, he suddenly sensed that something was wrong. Because after this strange flame was devoured, the fuel reserve of the talent tree actually didn't change. Logically speaking, if devouring the strange flame wasn't a condition for transformation, then it would increase the fuel reserve. But the fuel reserve didn't increase. So where did the strange flame go? It couldn't be that it disappeared into thin air. That was a treasure nurtured by many flaming sun essences. Calming his mind, he carefully examined it. Soon, Lu Yi discovered a change in the talent tree. On the leaf that carried the 3 strands of Tao power that he spent a month cultivating, there was now an additional golden strand, turning into 4 strands. The Tao power increased. Was this brought about by devouring the strange flame? Thinking about it carefully, it seemed that this was the only explanation. He had previously speculated that the power exerted by the treasures contained Tao power. Otherwise, it would be impossible for it to be such a big threat to those strange visitors from the star abyss. It was just that this speculation couldn't be verified, but now this evidence was directly placed in front of him. The extra strand of Tao power couldn't have appeared out of thin air, and the strange flame couldn't have disappeared without a trace. It was transformed into this strand of Tao power by the talent tree. Although he was very sure that it wasn't wrong, this kind of thing still needed to be verified. Lu Yi used some flaming sun essences to nurture another ball of strange flame and let the talent tree devour it. This time, he carefully observed the leaf that carried the Tao power. Sure enough, after that ball of strange flame was devoured, there was an additional strand of golden Tao power on the leaf. Turning the 4 strands into 5, Lu Yi was extremely happy. With his own cultivation efficiency in this environment, he could only obtain a strand of Tao power after 10 days. But if he borrowed the power of the treasures, the efficiency would be much higher. The only restriction was the supply of resources. Even if he exhausted all the treasures and flaming sun essences he had on him, he could obtain more than 100 strands of Tao power. 100 strands of Tao power, according to the information provided by the Thunder Battle Fort, was a capital that only experts who entered the Tao realm had. Those who didn't enter the Tao realm, even the strange visitors from the Star Abyss, didn't have so much Tao power to use. In other words, if Lu Yi converted all the resources he had into Tao power, then even if he wasn't in the Tao realm, he would be comparable to it. Was there anything in this world that was more profitable than this? Also, a ball of strange flame in the fire gourd was a strand of Tao power. Then, what if he let the talent tree devour the fire gourd? How much Tao power would it obtain? It was definitely not as simple as a strand. Treasures were the condensation of Tao, and treasures were the derivatives of treasures. Then the treasures were also the condensation of Tao power. No matter what kind of treasure it would definitely contain a lot of Tao power. Tao tree. So that's how it is. The name of the Tao tree has such a deep meaning. In a trance, many things seem to have been made clear. Lu Yi had never understood why the talent tree was called the Tao tree. Only today did he have a clue. He indeed wouldn't let the talent tree devour the fire gourd and the sword gourd, But he had more than these 2 treasures. With a thought, he took out a palm-sized broken umbrella. Heaven Luo umbrella. This thing couldn't be repaired in Hua Si's place, and it couldn't be repaired in the Constellation Hall either, because it didn't fit. Lu Yi originally planned to put it in the Spirit Jade Mine, but he forgot about it. Since this treasure was broken, it was just right to take it out and devour it. However, just as Lu Yi was about to do so, he stopped and pondered for a while. Then he channeled his Tao power into the Heaven Luo umbrella. End of chapter. Chapter 2094. At this point, Lu Yi roughly understood why a damaged treasure could be placed next to a supreme treasure to repair itself. Because supreme treasures were the condensation of Tao, so as long as they were compatible, the treasure could borrow the supreme treasure's Tao energy to repair itself. Since that was the case, could his Tao energy have the ability to repair it? If it could, then this heavenly Luo umbrella still had some use. At the very least, it could be used by Jiu Yin to protect herself. On the talent tree's leaf, a trace of golden Tao energy disappeared. A layer of golden light appeared on the damaged heavenly Luo umbrella and quickly disappeared. It was still broken, but Lu Yi found that compared to before, the heavenly Luo umbrella was obviously better. It could really be repaired. His Tao energy and the heavenly Luo umbrella naturally couldn't be said to be compatible. Because he was a cultivator and not a supreme treasure, such a result was expected. Lu Yi used up another trace of the remaining 4 traces of Tao energy. Just like when the heavenly Luo umbrella flashed with a golden light, the damaged situation was slightly better. Lu Yi didn't continue because he found that according to this progress, a few traces of Tao energy were not enough to repair the heavenly Luo umbrella. He needed more Tao energy. The heavenly Luo umbrella was still useful and couldn't be devoured. Since that was the case, Lu Yi fumbled around in his storage ring and took out a fist-sized square object. The Dice of Fate. This treasure from the Azura field was undoubtedly the most suitable to be devoured. Although it had mysterious abilities, it was neither an offensive treasure nor a defensive treasure. To Lu Yi, such a treasure was actually of little value. After returning from the Azura field, he didn't even take the initiative to use this thing again, afraid that if it shook out a great calamity, it would bring bad luck. Holding the die, Lu Yi urged the talent tree. Invisible roots spread out from his palm and pierced into the die. Under the crazy devouring, Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. An endless stream of pure and continuous mysterious Tao energy flowed out from the die and into his body. At this moment, the talent tree bloomed with a more dazzling light than ever before. The entire tree swayed. Lu Yi quickly immersed his mind to check the changes. He could feel that after the Tao power that flowed out of the die was swallowed by the talent tree, it did not immediately become his own Tao power. Instead, it experienced some wonderful precipitation and changes in the talent tree. Lu Yi pondered for a moment and understood the whole story. Even the power of Tao was not completely the same. Take the attribute treasure, for example. The power of Tao nurtured in the fire gourd was extremely hot and strong, while the power of Tao in the sword gourd was extremely sharp. This kind of Tao power was not compatible with his body, so it naturally needed the conversion of the talent tree. After that kind of wonderful precipitation and change, it would become his Tao power. On the leaf, which originally only had 3 strands of Tao power left, a golden light began to bloom. Strands of new Tao power began to appear, and the number gradually increased. In just a moment, the leaf was covered in golden light, and there was no more space. Another blank leaf nearby began to emit a golden light, and a new Tao energy appeared. More than half a day later, Lu Yi opened his hand. The Die of Fate had completely disappeared, as if it had never existed in the first place. In its place, the 4 leaves of the talent tree shone with a golden light. 3 of them were filled with Tao power, while the 4th one was still empty. Lu Yi carefully counted and discovered that he now had as many as 126 strands of Tao power. He fiercely exhaled. Ever since he came to the front lines, he had always been careful and on edge, afraid that he would encounter an expert that he could not defeat. But at this moment, all his worries were swept away. Luya stood up again. 126 strands of Tao power. Excluding the initial 3 strands, the amount of Tao power he obtained from swallowing a die of fate was 123 strands. This kind of increase was simply terrifying. According to the current situation, only experts who had entered the Tao realm were qualified to possess 100 strands of Tao power. Lu Yi had clearly surpassed this standard. But speaking of which, although in theory the more Tao energy one possessed, the stronger it wasn't absolute. Those who possessed Tao energy would fuse their Tao energy into their own Dharma energy when they fought against their enemies, whether it was attacking or defending, causing their might to increase greatly, and it was a world of difference when compared to ordinary cultivators. But whether it was a starry sky cultivator or a star abyss stranger, the activation of Tao power was not limitless. Take the current Lu Yi, for example. He could not activate more than 100 strands of Tao power at once. It was already beyond the scope of what he could control. Therefore, when encountering an enemy, the use of Tao power became the key to victory or defeat. The only absolute thing was that the more Tao power one had, the stronger the ability to continue fighting. Now that he had a huge capital, Lu Yi once again took out the heavenly Luo umbrella and urged his Tao power to repair it. Although doing so would consume a lot of his Tao power, in this kind of place he did not dare to say that he could protect Jiyan's safety. With a treasure to protect herself, Jiyan would be safer. His own Tao power continued to be consumed. When there were only 80 strands of Tao power left, the broken heavenly Azura was finally completely repaired. Without any delay, Lu Yi called out to Jiyan. Jiyan opened her eyes and looked at him, puzzled. She knew that if it was not urgent, Lu Yi would not disturb her. But at this moment, there were no traces of enemies, so she was not sure why Lu Yi called her. "This is for you." Lu Yi handed over the heavenly Luo umbrella. "What is this?" Jiyan curiously took it and carefully examined it. Then, as if she had sensed something, she said in surprise, "This shouldn't be the heavenly Luo umbrella, right?" The winged sky star Xinyun had been killed in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, and the heavenly Luo umbrella had been broken. Jiyan naturally had heard of it, so she recognized this treasure at a glance. Exactly. Lu Yi did not hide it from her. "Senior sister, refine this treasure to protect yourself first. It won't be too late to cultivate later." "No." Jiyan flatly refused and handed the heavenly Luo umbrella back. "This thing is too precious. I can't accept it." Her relationship with Lu Yi was, after all, somewhat unclear. How could she accept such a precious treasure? Lu Yi already knew she would have this attitude, so he said, "Just think of it as me lending it to senior sister." "That won't do. Refine it yourself. This treasure's defense is very powerful. At a critical moment, it can protect your life. It's like this, senior sister." Lu Yi said the excuse he had prepared before. The reason why attribute treasures are so powerful is because they contain Tao energy when they are activated. If senior sister refines it and immerses herself in comprehending it, you might be able to see the wonders of Tao energy. This should be of great benefit to you in forging your own Tao foundation. The power of attribute treasures contains Tao energy. Jiyan fell into deep thought. Then her eyes lit up. "That makes sense. How did you come up with this idea?" Lu Yi blinked. "Because I have several attribute treasures. I have already comprehended the wonders of Tao energy." Even though Jiyan knew some of Lu Ye's background, she could not help but want to hit him when she heard this. Countless cultivators in the starry sky would scramble for attribute treasures, but Lu Yi had several of them. "So, senior sister does not need to worry about my safety. My current strength should not be weaker than those in the Tao realm." "Bullshit." "Of course." Jiyan did not believe him. Not long ago, Lu Yi came back from the dead. It had only been a little more than a month. How could his strength have improved so much? However, Lu Ye's words had undoubtedly tempted her. If she could use the Tao energy and the attribute treasures to comprehend, it would indeed be beneficial to her in forging her Tao foundation. This treasure, I will borrow it first. If you need anything, just let me know. Juyen pursed her lips and sighed in her heart. She owed him another favor. She knew in her heart that if it were not for her, Lu Yi would not have lent out any attribute treasures, no matter how many he had. She began cultivating again, but this time she was not in a hurry to turn herself into a furnace. Instead, she began to refine the heavenly Luo umbrella. Refining attribute treasures was not too difficult. Strictly speaking, attribute treasures were only magic treasures of higher quality. As long as one progressed step by step and had enough cultivation, anyone could refine them. Lu Yi remained vigilant while cultivating. When it came to Tao energy, no amount of Tao energy would be too much. Now that she had come to this part of the starry sky, there was no way to return for the time being. She could only try her best to become stronger. The only thing Lu Yi regretted was that his cultivation was not enough. If he was already at the peak of the sunshine realm and had condensed the divine flower, he should be able to forge his Tao foundation easily and enter the Tao realm. After all, he could even cultivate Tao energy. Forging his Tao foundation should not be difficult. However, 9 out of 10 things in life did not go according to one's wishes. There was no such thing as perfection. 2 months passed in this way. Thousands of miles away from Juyen's place of cultivation, Lu Ye's figure swept over. He had sensed that there was a battle here, so he came to check it out in case the aftermath disturbed Juyen. As for Juyen's safety, there was no need to worry. She had already refined the heavenly Luo umbrella, and the precious blood clone was left there. Lu Yi could return at any time. He looked up and saw several figures fighting fiercely. One of them was obviously a cultivator from the starry sky, because the other party was wearing a human-shaped armor. The others were all from the starry sky. Although they were of different races, the star abyss aura on them was very obvious. Fighting one against many. Even if the cultivator in armor was a Tao realm powerhouse who had forged his Tao foundation, he was still in danger. This person was extremely brave. After enduring a round of attacks from the enemy, he managed to kill one of the starry sky cultivators. However, this time his armor was damaged and became somewhat tattered. Seeing this, Lu Yi knew that the cultivator in armor would not be able to hold on for long. The long, fierce battle had severely depleted his Tao energy. Once his Tao energy was exhausted, only death awaited him. In such a situation, Lu Yi could not stand by and do nothing. Although he was not from the Yunyuan starry sky, his position towards the star abyss was the same as the Yunyuan starry sky. Without hesitation, Lu Yi rushed into the battlefield. The few star abyss cultivators who were besieging the cultivator in armor clearly sensed Lu Ye's aura. Immediately, a figure separated from them and went to meet Lu Yi. This guy was from the two-headed race. He was born with 2 heads. One was full of smiles, and the other was ferocious and terrifying. He looked extremely strange. End of chapter. Chapter 2095. Releasing his divine sense and sensing Lu Ye's cultivation, the two-headed race member immediately revealed a disapproving expression. Because a cultivator with Lu Ye's cultivation couldn't possibly possess Tao energy. This kind of cultivator was practically an ant in front of him and could be killed at will. The distance between them rapidly closed. Lu Yi slowly pulled out the mountain coiling saber and urged his magic power, adding a trace of Tao energy to the saber. Passing by, not only did Lu Ye's speed not decrease, it instead became somewhat faster. Behind him, the two-headed race member stiffly froze in place. Immediately after, his body split into 2. His stunned eyes were filled with shock and unwillingness. He never thought that he would actually die at the hands of an ant. Because he was too arrogant, he didn't even use Tao energy, which was why he died so suddenly. He didn't expect this, and the several figures in the battle group also didn't expect this. So when Lu Yi suddenly charged into the battle circle, the Star Abyss outsiders were all greatly shocked. Even that cultivator in armor who was surrounded was stunned for a moment. But he quickly realized that this was an opportunity. At once he shouted angrily. A cylindrical object suddenly protruded from the chest of his armor, blossoming with a ball of intense light. With this, those Star Abyss outsiders were caught off guard. All of them couldn't see, and even their souls were somewhat shaken. On the contrary, Lu Yi wasn't affected at all, because the cultivator in armor had already secretly transmitted a message to let him be on guard before making his move. Lu Yi followed the saber, his figure sweeping away. Every time he paused, a ball of bloody light would blossom. These enemies who could give him and Jian headaches a few months ago, any one of them could make him and Jian join forces. Now, killing them was as easy as blowing off dust. This was the difference between being able to control Tao energy and not. In an instant, only the last figure remained of the several Star Abyss outsiders. That cultivator in armor already charged in front of the other, each move deadly and abnormally fierce. When surrounded, he wasn't a match, but in a one-on-one fight, this Star Abyss outsider couldn't do it. He had already entered the Tao realm after all. Seeing this scene, Lu Yi didn't stay any longer and flashed away. A moment later, in the wake of that cultivator in armor beheading the last Star Abyss outsider, he raised his head to look, but Lu Ye's figure was already nowhere to be seen. For a moment, he was disappointed and frustrated. After all, it was a life-saving grace. Originally, he wanted to thank the other party properly. Who would have thought that it would be the same as the rumors? This cultivator who cultivated the ancient technique would always leave after the matter was done. It was not an accident that he came here. He came here on purpose because he heard that there was a very powerful expert nearby who had saved people several times. That was why he fled in this direction when he was besieged. It was because he had a glimmer of hope in his heart. The result proved that the rumors were true. Lu Ye's attack just now gave him the feeling that he was at least a fourth Tao expert. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to kill the enemy like cutting grass. Only the aura fluctuations Lu Yi revealed earlier caused him to be slightly puzzled, because that aura faintly seemed to be at the initial stage of the God rank realm. Thinking about it, he shook his head and laughed. If he was really only at the early stage of the God realm, how could he control Tao energy? His divine sense surged as he transmitted his voice in all directions. He sincerely expressed his thanks. Regardless of whether the other party heard him or not, this was still a courtesy that he should show. Only then did he turn around and leave. He had consumed quite a bit of energy in this battle, so he had to quickly recover. At this time, Lu Yi had already returned to the precious blood clone with the help of the void spirit veins. Naturally, he could not hear the other party's thanks. During this period, he had been guarding Jian while accumulating his own Tao energy. Unless there was a fight nearby, he would go over to check the situation. He had taken action several times and saved the lives of several cultivators in the starry sky. After taking action several times, he probably figured out his current limit. According to the division of the starry sky, he should be a fifth Tao cultivator now. Fourth Tao, fifth Tao. It was not a realm, but a division of strength. The number of Tao energy a cultivator could control at one time was the number of Tao energy they could control. The more Tao energy they could control, the stronger their strength. In other words, the limit of Tao energy he could control at one time was 5 Tao energy. With the support of 5 Tao energy, whether it was used for defense or attack, he could exert an extremely powerful force. The limit of Tao energy a cultivator could control was directly related to the cultivator's foundation. The more solid the foundation, the higher the upper limit. Generally, Star Abyss's outsiders who had not reached the Tao initiation realm could only control 1 Tao energy. However, it was different after entering the Tao realm, as they could control at least 2 Tao energy. Lu Yi had not come into contact with many Dao realm experts, so he did not know how good his fifth Dao energy was. However, judging from the few times he had taken action, his fifth Dao energy should not be bad. After all, his foundation had always been very solid, thanks to the talent tree. Since the beginning of his cultivation, he had the ability to kill enemies above his realm. Xingxiu and Yu Yao had also reached their limit. Compared to his smooth sailing journey, Juyan seemed to have gained little. It had been almost half a year since she entered the frontline battlefield. Although she had wasted a month because she had to escape and heal, Jian still showed no signs of forging her Dao foundation. Lu Yi could not help much in this matter. It was all up to her. Juyan's foundation was not bad. Anyone who could reach the peak of the Sunshine Realm would not be bad. Moreover, many cultivators in Starry Sky 1 had already entered the Dao realm, so Lu Yi believed that Jian would take that step sooner or later. There seemed to be a Dao enlightenment pond in the Thunder Battle Fort. It was built by a Starry Sky cultivator to help people forge their Dao foundation. That place simulated the various mysteries of the smelting furnace method. If they could enter and take a look, it would be of great help to Jian. However, the two of them still had a shallow foundation here. They did not have the qualifications or the connections to enter. The only way was to exchange battle merits for it. Killing Star Abyss's outsiders would earn them battle merits. They could either record their images with a shadow recording stone or collect the enemy's corpse. After bringing it back to the Thunder Battle Fort, there would be someone to check it and accumulate battle merits. Lu Yi had not considered this before, but now it seemed that he had to make more preparations. The frontline battlefield was a vast place. As long as one entered this place, a fight could break out at any time. There was no place that was absolutely safe. Moreover, this battlefield was constantly expanding with the invasion of Star Abyss's aura. It seemed that because Lu Yi had helped others several times and each time he acted, he was able to destroy everything in his path. This caused his reputation to slowly spread. This led to Starry Sky cultivators who encountered danger from time to time, fleeing to his vicinity. No one knew where he was. The only thing they knew was that as long as they ran close to him, they would be able to get help from him. The place where he and Jiyan were located, within a range of tens of thousands of kilometers, had gradually become a safe haven for Starry Sky cultivators. He also slowly became aware of this change and did not know whether to laugh or cry. On this day, Lu Yi once again noticed that there were movements in the vicinity. Moreover, the range of movements of the two sides was very large. If this situation continued, it was very likely that it would disturb Jiyan. Helplessly, he could only set out to investigate again. A moment later, he arrived at the periphery of the battlefield. Looking up in that direction, he could not help but be startled by the scene he saw, because the two sides fighting this time were actually two cultivators in armor. One of them was riding a 3-meter-tall humanoid armor, giving off an awe-inspiring aura. The other was riding a serpent-shaped armor with a strange figure. Lu Yi frowned. Why were the cultivators of the 1 yuan Starry Sky fighting among themselves? He had never encountered such a situation before. Because the Starry Sky was invaded by the Star Abyss, the survival of the Starry Sky was imminent. Therefore, in the past few hundred years, the Starry Sky cultivators had been extremely united. There was basically no friction between them. Moreover, according to the rules of the Thunder Battle Fort, it was a big crime for companions to fight. Once discovered, they would be punished by the powerhouses. He thought that this was the same situation as before, but now it was not good for him to make a move. Just as he was about to retreat, he suddenly frowned and turned his head to look to the side. In that direction, a beautiful and graceful figure had appeared out of nowhere. It was a woman whose hair was tied up high. She wore a set of tight-fitting leather armor, and her chest was high. She looked extremely capable and experienced. Her eyebrows were sharp like swords, and she gave people a feeling of being swift and decisive. She looked at Lu Yi with interest and held an object in her hand. After a brief inspection, she raised her eyebrows and asked, "Lu Yi?" Lu Yi also had the same thing in her hand, which he had obtained from the Thunder Battle Fort. It contained the basic information of all the registered cultivators. It was with this object that the woman knew Lu Ye's name, but soon she showed a puzzled look. Unknown origin, cultivation, early spirit realm. So strange. Lu Yi suddenly became vigilant, because with the appearance of this woman, the two armors fighting fiercely over there had stopped and looked over, as if they were watching a good show. These two guys were actually acting just now. At this time he also reacted. These three people had deliberately lured him out, which was why they had made such a big noise. "This senior sister, how should I address you?" Lu Yi asked while secretly urging his magic power. He vaguely felt that he had come here for nothing good. "If you want to know my name, take my punch first." The woman put away the object in her hand and smiled. Her vigorous figure suddenly appeared in front of Lu Yi, and she reminded him, "This punch of mine has the power of 3 Daos. If you can't take it, you'll die." Her movements were extremely fast. She was the fastest person Lu Yi had seen so far. Obviously, she was not an ordinary powerhouse. Although this woman was smiling on the surface, her punch was full of killing intent, and her whole body was filled with a strong smell of blood. Lu Ye's expression was stern. He immediately understood that this woman was definitely a powerhouse who had killed a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. When he heard the woman say that her punch had the power of 3 Daos, how could he dare to be careless? He immediately urged his magic power to protect himself and his Dao power to support him. Under the punch, Lu Ye's body shook. At the same time, the protective magic power shattered, and the Dao power he had urged also disappeared. Lu Ye's expression changed. This woman actually lied to him. She said that it was the power of 3 Daos, but it was obviously 4 or even 5 Daos. Otherwise, it was impossible to break his protective magic power with one punch. If the woman really only used the power of 3 Daos, he should be able to take this punch safely. There was no time to urge his magic power to protect himself. The moment he unsheathed his long saber, he slashed at the woman's head. End of chapter. Chapter 2096. However, the blade didn't manage to chop down. Just as the Pan Shan blade was about to fall, the woman stretched out 2 fingers and accurately pinched the blade. Her strength was so strong that the Pan Shan blade that was moving like lightning suddenly stopped. She looked at Lu Yi with a pair of bright eyes and revealed a satisfied expression. She kept nodding and said, "Very good. You are indeed qualified. I didn't make a mistake coming here." Lu Yi frowned. The long blade in his hand shook and broke free from her grip. He drifted back and asked, "What do you mean?" "What do I mean?" The woman smiled. Then her smile disappeared. She took out a token and waved it at Lu Yi from afar. She shouted, "I am the captain of the Thunder Battle Fort's hunting camp, Team A3, Du Qingsha. I am now recruiting you to join my team to kill the enemy." Lu Ye's eyes couldn't help but twitch. In fact, he had already vaguely thought of this just now. The hunting camp was a special existence in the Thunder Battle Fort. At the same time, it was the backbone of the Thunder Battle Fort's resistance against the outsiders from the Star Abyss. This was because if one wanted to join the hunting camp, the minimum requirement was to cast the Dao Foundation and enter the Dao realm. Cultivators without the Dao Foundation didn't have this qualification. The hunting camp gathered almost 80% of the Thunder Battle Fort's high-end forces. They were divided into small teams and hunted the enemies on the front line. This Du Qingsha was clearly not an ordinary Dao realm cultivator, since she could be the captain of a small team. Judging from the might of her attack just now, this woman was at least a 4th Dao realm cultivator. Of course, such a person was qualified to be a captain. The 2 people who had been fighting fiercely earlier, but were now standing not far away to watch the show, were undoubtedly her teammates. She had obviously heard some rumors. So she deliberately came here to test Lu Ye's strength and then wanted to recruit her. This was troublesome. During this period of time, Lu Yi had taken action many times. Although he saved the lives of some Thunder Battle Fort cultivators, he didn't have any interactions with them because he had to protect Jiyan. But he didn't expect that he would still attract Du Qingsha. As the captain of the hunting camp, she had the right to recruit people. According to the rules of the Thunder Battle Fort, Lu Yi couldn't refuse her recruitment. In the case of refusal, that would be avoiding a fight. In the current starry sky environment, consciously avoiding a fight was intolerable to all cultivators. At that time, Du Qingsha would only need to report back to the Thunder Battle Fort, and that Lu Yi would become the target of all starry sky cultivators. If he was really alone, then so be it. If he was wanted, then so be it. When the time came, he could just find a secluded corner to hide, and no one would be able to do anything to him. However, Jian still needed to cultivate on the battlefield. If Lu Ye took her to a remote place to hide, Jian would never be able to cast her Taoist foundation. Should he kill the three of them? Lu Yi dismissed the thought as soon as it appeared. He was confident that he could take care of the other two cultivators in armor who were watching the show nearby, but this Du Qingsha he was somewhat unable to see through her. Interesting, you want to kill me? Du Qingsha suddenly raised her eyebrows and looked at Lu Yi with interest. There's no such thing. Senior Du, you've misunderstood. Lu Yi replied calmly. This woman, her perception was very strong. His killing intent had only flashed by for a moment, and it wasn't strong, but she had actually sensed it. There's no such thing as a misunderstanding. You have two options now. Du Qingsha raised a finger. 1. Join my team, and I'll lead you to kill enemies. 2. Refuse my recruitment, and then I'll kill you. You can try and see if you can escape. When she said this, Du Qingsha's face was filled with eagerness, as if she couldn't wait for Lu Yi to say no. Lu Yi cupped his fists. It's my honor to be chosen by Senior Du and specially recruited. I'm willing to join Senior Du's team and live and die with you. Since he couldn't refuse, then he could only join. At least you know your place. Du Qingsha nodded in satisfaction. But you can state your conditions. Be my team member, and I can give you anything you want as long as you're obedient. Lu Yi originally wanted to state other conditions, but since she said this, then, I want the right to enter the Enlightenment Pond. Du Qingsha blinked and then cursed. You're dreaming. Enlightenment Pond. Do you know the price you have to pay to enter the Enlightenment Pond? If you want to enter the Enlightenment Pond, you have to kill enemies with me. If you kill enough, you'll naturally have enough battle merits. Lu Yi was just casually mentioning it. Of course. He knew that Du Qingsha wouldn't agree to such a condition. He took a step back and said, Then I hope to be recommended by Senior Du. Du Qingsha was a leader of the hunting camp. Her strength wasn't bad, and her status wasn't bad either. People like her had the right to be recommended. With her recommendation, not only would they have the right to enter the Enlightenment Pond first, but the amount of battle merits they needed would also be greatly reduced. Du Qingsha frowned and sized him up. You've already entered the Tao, so you don't need the Enlightenment Pond. Is this prepared for someone else? Yes. Lu Yi nodded. Du Qingsha thought for a while, then suddenly raised her hand. Get over here. With a command, the two cultivators who were watching the show from afar quickly flew over. The three of them gathered together and communicated with their divine senses. Lu Yi didn't know what they were talking about, so he quietly waited on the side. After a while, Du Qingsha said, I can give you the recommendation. Also, I just calculated that with the battle merits of the three of us, we should be able to enter the Enlightenment Pond once. If you need it, you can use it. But first, I'll say that the battle merits are borrowed from you. You have to return it to them later. Lu Yi couldn't help but be stunned. He didn't have a good impression of Du Qingsha at first because she wasted a few strands of his Dao energy. At this stage, Dao energy was the foundation of one's cultivation. It wasn't easy to cultivate it. Moreover, Du Qingsha's way of doing things was very overbearing. He didn't like it. But since she was willing to do this, what else could Lu Yi say? Why me? He couldn't help but ask. Du Qingsha couldn't help but snort. Don't think too highly of yourself. The main thing is that there are too few cultivators from the 3 Dao on the battlefield. You just happen to meet my requirements. My A3 team is the most elite team. It's better to have nothing than to have something substandard. Do you understand? All right. Lu Yi touched his nose and bowed solemnly. No matter what, I have to thank you first, senior sister and senior brothers. With the battle merits of the 3 of them and Du Qingsha's recommendation, Zhu Yan would be able to get a chance to enter the Enlightenment Pond. It would solve his urgent need. After a while, Lu Yi led the 3 of them to Zhu Yan and explained the situation to her. Zhu Yan naturally knew that she couldn't refuse the invitation of the hunting camp's captain. Also, she wasn't suitable to act with Lu Yi at the moment. She was just surprised that Lu Yi was invited by the hunting camp. As far as she knew, Lu Ye's strength was inferior to hers. She had been cultivating all this time and didn't know that Lu Ye's strength had changed so much. It wasn't until Lu Yi displayed his own Dao power that Zhu Yan realized that Lu Yi was already 1 step ahead of him in terms of Dao cultivation. For a moment he had mixed feelings. He was happy for Lu Yi, but also ashamed of his own incompetence. Zhu Yan wasn't a wishy-washy person. At this point, the only thing she could do was to accept Lu Ye's kindness and build her Dao foundation as soon as possible. The group headed back to the Thunder Battle Fort without stopping for a rest. In just a few days, they arrived at the Thunder Battle Fort and entered. Lu Yi didn't need to be involved in the following matters. Du Qingsha would take care of it. Her status here was much higher than Lu Ye's. Half a day later, Du Qingsha found Lu Yi, who was waiting somewhere. It's all arranged. However, your woman will have to wait for 2 months before she can enter the Enlightenment Pond. There were too many people who wanted to enter the Enlightenment Pond. Even with Du Qingsha's recommendation, they still had to wait for a while. It wasn't as if they could enter right away. Of course, Lu Yi could understand and thanked her again. Is there anything you need to prepare? If so, hurry up. Du Qingsha looked at the other 2. These 2 were the ones who had put on a show to lure Lu Yi out. They were a man and a woman. The man was called Su Rong, the owner of the human-shaped armor. The woman was called Snake Lady, and she was wearing the snake-shaped armor. She was just like her name, with an enchanting figure, soft as if boneless, and a gorgeous face. Only her tongue was like a snake's forked tongue. She was a snake demon of the demon clan. After a few days, although Lu Yi didn't get to know them well, at least he had some understanding of them. Including Lu Yi, the 4 of them made up the entire Team A3. Originally, there was another one. However, he died in the battlefield not long ago. Therefore, Du Qingsha wanted to recruit a new member. Coincidentally, she heard about Lu Ye's existence and went to try. In the end, Lu Ye's performance really met her requirements. No matter Su Rong or Snake Lady, they were both cultivators of the 3 Daos. As for Du Qingsha, she was a cultivator of the 5 Daos. In terms of strength, she was much stronger than Su Rong and Snake Lady. Facing Du Qingsha's question, Su Rong smiled. There's nothing to prepare. My head is on my belt. There's nothing but my life. Then let's go. Du Qingsha waved her hand and took the lead to fly out. Su Rong and Snake Lady followed closely behind. Lu Yi looked back one last time and followed closely behind. He hoped that the next time he came back, Jian could enter the Dao realm. The 4 of them quickly left the Thunder Battle Fortress and entered the battlefield. Lu Yi keenly noticed that compared to when he entered half a year ago, The edge of the battlefield had obviously expanded. This was undoubtedly the result of the erosion of the star abyss's aura, and there were many such battlefields in this part of the starry sky. In the long run, sooner or later, the entire starry sky would be flooded by the star abyss's aura. By then, there would be no more peaceful places. Suddenly, something flew in front of him. Lu Yi stretched out his hand and caught it. Du Qingsha's voice sounded beside his ear. Previously, you lost your Tao power. This should be able to make up for it. Refine it along the way. Lu Yi looked down and saw a chopstick-length white bone in his hand. Looking at its shape, it should be the upper arm bone of an arm. Tao Foundation. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. Whether it was a cultivator of the starry sky or an outsider of the star abyss, after entering the Tao realm, they would choose a part of their body as their Tao Foundation. It could be their internal organs, bones, or even a piece of flesh. This would be the most important part of their body. This was because the Tao Foundation would carry the Tao power obtained from cultivation. Once it was lost, the Tao Foundation would be destroyed. Generally speaking, everyone would choose a piece of bone because the bone was the hardest. The bone in Lu Ye's hand should be the carrier of some outsider's Tao Foundation. It was also known as the Tao bone. End of chapter.